Westport special town meeting will please come to order. Would all please rise and join me in saluting the flag. We can all imagine a flag here pointing this direction. I pledge allegiance Thank you all for coming. It's great to see so many faces here. Can you hear me in the back of the room? Is the mic volume okay? Good. So this is what we're here to do tonight. We're going to go through a few simple preliminaries, going to explain how the meeting works, then we're going to act on all the articles of the town meeting warrant. So, what are we doing here? We're the town's legislature here to act on the articles of the town meeting warrant. My name is Stephen Forrest. I'm the town moderator. I chair the meeting and I decide questions of order. I want to take a few minutes to explain how the meeting works. Town meeting is a gathering of the willing registered voters of the town as a legislature to decide upon the matters in the warrant. The warrant is a list prepared by the Board of Selectmen of matters that we will act on in this meeting. We will act on every item in the warrant. We will not act on anything that is not in the warrant. The individual items are called warrant articles. A warrant article we'll address these items one by one. The procedure begins with me reading the article or a summary of it. An article poses a question. I will then ask for a motion, which is the proposed answer to that question, or possibly a suggestion that we not answer the question at all. These are usually arranged in advance so that we have the proper legalese for them. When possible, and I think every time tonight, those motions will be visible to you on slides up in front. We then follow the tradition of asking for a second to make sure at least 2 people in the room are in favor of it. We then get a recommendation from the Finance Committee. That is followed by discussion in which you are all invited to participate, and then we vote. And when we voted, we move on to the next article of the warrant. We operate under a set of rules that will be enforced politely but firmly. The purpose of the rules is to allow us to complete our business in an efficient, orderly way, identifying and acting on the will of the majority while respecting the minority and always showing appropriate respect for our neighbors. There are several rules, but they can really be summed up in these 4. We are polite, we deal with one thing at a time, no one gets an unfair advantage, and we move it along as fast as we can without sacrificing 1 through 3. Our rules come from 4 sources. Our town bylaws, a book called Town Meeting Time, tradition, the way we've just been doing it for a long time, and my judgment. If you choose to participate in discussion, please wait to be recognized or given the floor by me. Please begin by stating your name. Please speak only to the question in front of us at that time, and no personal speech, which means we do not reference other people by name. We do not talk about what other people think or feel or believe. If we want to reference something that another speaker said, we say the previous speaker rather than mentioning people by names. Certainly rude and disrespectful speech cannot be tolerated. Everyone can speak as many times on a question as they like, but nobody gets to speak for a second time until everyone who wants to speak for a first time has had that opportunity. We limit speech from the floor to 5 minutes. If you have not been here before, you will learn quickly that 5 minutes is way longer than you need to make your point. By the end of 5 minutes, no one remembers what you said in the first 2 minutes. We will, however, have a couple of 10-minute presentations tonight that will be supported by PowerPoint slides so that we can follow a longer speech and a longer set of ideas, and those are only allowed by prearrangement. Now, as I said earlier, a warrant article poses a question, and someone will make a motion to propose a specific answer to that question. But as we proceed with discussion, we might feel like we want to answer that question in a slightly different way, and that would take place if someone proposed an amendment to the motion. And you're certainly welcome to do that. Although, if you do propose an amendment, if it's simple and only changes a number or a word or two, you can make that from the floor. But if it's more complex than that, I'm going to ask you to write it on paper, come over here and say, psst, and hand it to me. Another thing that takes a little getting used to with the meeting is the way we deal with questions, because as you're trying to decide how to vote on the things before you, you may feel like you want to ask a question of someone who has more information about it than you do. We don't ask questions directly of another person. You always ask questions through me. So say, for example, you wanted to ask a question of our town council. You would say, Mr. Moderator, through you, I have a question for town council. I would say, what is your question? You would tell me what your question is. I would turn to town council and ask him the question. He would say, Mr. Moderator, through you. He would answer me, and then I would go back to the questioner to make sure that they were answered to their satisfaction. It avoids people talking back and forth, which does become a problem. And there may be a time when we'll have a question and we won't know who the best person is to answer it. So if we'll sometimes ask for a volunteer. Usually that's going to be someone with specific expertise, a member of a board, town council, something like that. But I am going to ask those who answer questions to answer them as briefly as possible. If it's a yes or no question, then the answer is yes or no. Because in trying to keep everybody's speech time fair, if you're answering a question and you editorialize for 4 or 5 minutes, well, you got an unfair advantage by getting at the mic longer than others did. There are 2 circumstances in which you can stand up and interrupt the person who's speaking. The first is a point of order, and that refers to a situation in which I am making some kind of a mistake in the way that the meeting is being run. That has happened in the past. It will certainly happen again. So if you feel like I'm making a mistake, I'm violating the rules of the meeting, please stand up and say, Mr. Moderator, I rise to a point of order. I will ask you what your point of order is, and then either modify what we're doing in accordance with that, or if I disagree, we'll continue as we work. The other is a point of privilege, which refers to your ability to participate fully in the meeting. If people next to you are talking, if there is a fan blowing, if you can't hear me from the mic, if you can't hear a speaker from the mic, please rise to a point of privilege, and we will address that so that you can participate fully in the meeting. And this is your meeting, so I hope all these rules don't intimidate you and that you feel free to participate, and the penalty for violating the rules is pretty minor. I will just ask you to step back within the rules. So we are going to flex our voting muscles with a couple of procedural motions. I'm going to ask if someone would please make a motion that this meeting dispense with the reading of the warrant and of the constable's return of service of that warrant, and that the moderator not be required to read articles verbatim, but may refer to them by number and subject matter. Someone saying so moved would suffice. Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. That's how we do it. One other procedural motion. We will face a couple of issues tonight that require a 2/3 vote. And without this, we have to actually count hands and compute the 2/3. So I'm going to ask if someone will make a motion that if a 2/3 vote is required by statute, the moderator be authorized to declare a 2/3 vote in the same manner as a majority vote is declared, provided, however, that if a vote so declared is immediately questioned by 7 or more voters, the moderator shall verify by taking account. Once again, so moved. Thank you. Is there a second? A motion, a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. So we move to Article 1 of the warrant. Article 1 reads, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and or transfer from available funds such sums of money necessary for the purpose of paying outstanding bills from prior fiscal years and or take other action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. I will ask the Finance Committee Chair for a motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town appropriate for free cash the sum of $1,287 even to pay the outstanding bills from prior fiscal years listed in the warrant under Article 1.
I have a motion and a second. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommended in favor unanimously 8-0. 1 member was absent.
So for discussion with this is, if you look in your warrant, you'll notice that there are a couple of line items here. And so this is how we deal with warrant articles that have multiple line items. I'm going to read the 2 line items. If you agree with that line item, would vote yes on it, please remain silent. If you would vote no on that line item, if you want to ask a question about it, if you are anything but a yes, please say hold. So when I've finished reading all the line items, we will vote on those that do not have a hold. We will then return to discuss the ones with a hold and vote on those. So, South Coast Electric and Refrigeration Services for $956.25. East Bay Media Group for $330.75. So, Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion under Article 1, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 2, to see if the town will vote to amend the vote taken under Article 4 of the 2019 annual town meeting by transferring from available funds and/or various line items within the current appropriations such sums of money necessary to supplement the budgets of various departments for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2019, and/or taking other action relative thereto, sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Carrera, will you offer some motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move the town amend the vote taken under Article 4 of the 2019 annual town meeting by making the transfers between line items of the FY 2019 budget listed in the warrant article under Article 2.
Thanks. Is there a second? I have a motion and a second. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommended in favor unanimously, 8-0. One member was absent.
So, once again, we have a multiple line item article, so I will read each of these line items. If you would like to discuss it or if you would vote no, please say hold loud enough for me to hear. If you agree and would vote yes, please remain silent. From assessors' personnel expenses to assessors' expenses, $21,000. From health insurance to Board of Appeals personnel services, $3,000. From health insurance to Board of Appeals expenses, $1,000. From health insurance to town hall personnel services, $1,750. From health insurance to town hall expenses, $40,000. From Beech Grove cemetery expenses to cemetery department personnel services, $12,500. From Beech Grove cemetery expenses to cemetery department expenses, $2,500. So hearing no discussion on any of those line items.
One more on the next page.
Oh. So there is, thank you very much. Health insurance to LED streetlight projects, $5,000. So, seeing no discussion on any of those line items, all those in favor of the motion under Article 2 will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 3, to see if the town will vote to amend the Town of Westport bylaws and regulations, Article 54, right to farm bylaw is described in the article. This is sponsored by petition. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Mendel? Please. Please.
It's my pleasure.
If you'd offer just the motion, if you'd be kind enough to
Yes.
just read the text of the motion, thanks.
I move the town amend Article 54 of the Westport bylaws as follows, by inserting the following 4 paragraphs between existing paragraphs 2 and 3. There shall be no requirement to register, license, permit, and/or pre-approve the keeping of livestock with any town agency and/or department of the town of Westport except for the existing regulations for tenant farms. The town may require a livestock census to provide estimates on animal types and locations within town. This livestock census will be developed and managed by the Town of Westport's Agricultural Commission. The livestock census will serve 2 purposes only: to help facilitate the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture's barn book inspections and to improve local police and fire emergency preparedness. There will be no fees or fines associated with this livestock census. The livestock census may be shared on a confidential basis with local animal inspectors appointed by the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture to perform barn book inspections and the Town of Westport's police and fire departments. The livestock census will not be shared with any other person or agency unless so ordered by a court of competent jurisdiction. Furthermore, there shall be no town inspections, procedures, regulations, guidelines, penalties, fines, fees, punishments, and/or restrictions of any kind with respect to the keeping of livestock within the town of Westport that deviate in any way from existing Massachusetts general laws. This bylaw shall not limit the authority of the town's zoning enforcement officer, who pursuant to GLC 40A and the zoning bylaws has particular authority, or the Board of Health to exercise its authority to protect the public health under the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 111, Section 125A, 128G, 128H, and its express authority to promulgate regulations under General Law, Chapter 111, Section 31. and by deleting the existing paragraph 3 and replacing it with the word farm shall include any parcel or contiguous parcels of land of any size used for the primary purpose of agriculture.
Thank you. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee voted unanimously to make no recommendation, 8-0.
Thank you.
One member absent.
So, Ms. Mahoney, I believe you have a presentation? Now, would you like the slide change, or would you like me to change for you?
There are lots of questions after the Board of Health voted in their regulation in a room full of opposition, but the question I heard asked most often was, why didn't we get to vote? Tonight, you will have that opportunity. Westport, this is your town, your farms, your community, and tonight is your vote. Farms in our country are dying off at a rapid rate due to overregulation and development, but Westport has retained its farms and its open spaces. The right to farm bylaw in our town has made this possible. This bylaw states that local zoning bylaws may not unreasonably regulate or require special permits for agriculture and allows agriculture uses to function with minimum conflict with town agencies. We believe that the Board of Health regulation opposes this bylaw. Our right to farm bylaw was implemented to avoid the micromanagement of farms by town agencies, the result of which would have a diminishing effect on local farms. A town that does not protect its farms will lose its farms to development. Our Fourth Amendment provides the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. The current Board of Health regulation is divisive, and I have witnessed firsthand people, including board members, turning in animal owners at board meetings like it's a crime to own animals in our town. I also know of animal owners that have gotten rid of animals.
I'm going to ask you to please not characterize the actions of others like that.
Okay.
Thanks.
I have also known of animal owners that have gotten rid of animals rather than be subject to people rather than having to deal with a regulation or scrutiny. A town with members and people driving around with binoculars looking for animals in people's backyards is not good for our community, nor does it support our Fourth Amendment. The Board of Health stated several reasons as cause for implementing their regulation. Emergency preparedness. This has been proven false. Fire and police already have access to barn book information. Loose animals, also proven false. We have obtained police records, and these records indicate very little problems with escaping animals, and most animals are caught by owners before police involvement becomes necessary. Needing to know where the animals are located. This is not the job of the Board of Health. At a December Board of Health meeting attended by the Mass Department of Agriculture Director, you will hear him state in this meeting that animal health is outside the Board of Health jurisdiction. You will also hear him ask multiple questions why this information is needed and what job they are trying to do that requires this information. Animal abuse. Westport does not have an animal abuse problem. That's right, not one case of animal abuse by a Westport farmer in the last 5 years. Let's be clear, the tenant farmers involved in the abuse case in Westport were not the face of farming in Westport. The board would like you to believe that what they've implemented is just a
Please, don't characterize what other people would like others to believe. Thank you.
We believe that the regulation is not just a simple registry. It is not a simple registry. It's a registration form signed under penalty of perjury, required to be updated regularly, backed by a 4-page regulation that includes fines for noncompliance. This regulation does not support our farming community. Mass General Law, Chapter 111, Chapter 155, licensing of stables in cities was referenced as the jurisdiction for implementing this regulation. This section dates back to 1895 when horses were the main source of transportation. It relates to the commercial business of stabling horses in cities and large towns when they were being used as a livery service. It was also the loophole that allowed this regulation to be voted into effect without having to go to town meeting. But we believe that that vote did not belong to a board, it belonged to the people of Westport. But do you know what did go to town meeting? Our right to farm bylaw went to town meeting where it passed with almost unanimous support. And let's not forget, the town of Westport already had all the tools necessary to regulate farmers and animal owners if the tools were used properly. Farmers and animal owners in town are already regulated and inspected yearly by the Mass Department of Agriculture through the barn book inspection process. The Massachusetts Division of Animal Health is the state agency responsible for the health and safety of domestic animals. Through inspections, licensing, awareness, and education, this division helps to ensure the general welfare of companion and food-producing animals across the state. As stated on mass.gov, one of the duties of the municipal animal inspector is to perform barn inspections and get a good census of the domestic animal population of the town. Farmers and animal owners in our community already participate in and support this process. Let me tell you about some of the licenses, permits, inspections, and best management practices that the Mass Department of Agriculture already has in place in our state. We have a stable license on mass.gov. 5 pages. We have a dairy inspectional service, 3 pages. We have a swine program, 4 pages. Best management practices for backyard poultry keepers, 3 pages. We have a livestock and poultry best management practices, 87 pages. And we have another document on the UMass Extension for crops, dairy, livestock, and equine program. And this document has over 100 fact sheets all dealing with regulating animals in the state of Massachusetts and governed by MDAR. We believe that this regulation is entirely unnecessary. It duplicates a function already being performed by the Mass Department of Agriculture in our town. Westporters, the heart of Westport lies in its farms, and we live in a community surrounded by farms that feed our village. Are we willing to lay down the signs that designate our town as a farming community? Are we willing to sacrifice our farms and allow government agency overreach? Are we willing to give up Westport's current landscape as a farming community? The farmers and animal owners in Westport are the true animal advocates, spending every day caring and feeding for their animals, and tonight is the night that we vote to stand beside them. A vote in favor of strengthening our right to farm bylaw sends the message that we will not tolerate a regulation that doesn't support our farming community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and now we'll have a prearranged presentation by the Board of Health.
Good evening. I'll say next slide. Good evening. My name is Tanya Ryden. I'm the Vice Chair of the Board of Health.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? I feel like that's a commercial. Next slide. So why are we asking you to vote no? In the next 10 minutes, I'll be talking about why the Animal Site Registry is needed and how it's working already. How this proposed expansion of the Right to Farm bylaw conflicts with Board of Health authority and some of the confusion that may result. I'll talk about what legal experts have said very briefly. They're here also to weigh in. And show how Westport's current existing Right to Farm bylaw and Animal Site Registry are in the mainstream and how they compare to other towns. Finally, to be clear, the Board of Health respects and supports Right to Farm, and a no vote will still mean you support Westport's Right to Farm bylaw. Next slide. There was a handout tonight, and you could see what the actual one-page, one-time filing per property, not per animal, form entailed. Briefly, owner and emergency information, types of animals, estimated number of animals. It's very basic.
Is everyone hearing okay? Yeah, I think as you,
I'll lean in. Is that better? Okay. What's not in the registry or in the regulation, there is no fee, there is no permission or pre-approval required for keeping of animals. There are no limits on types or number of animals on any property. There are no rules or conditions on animal care or structures, and no Board of Health inspections. We need to start with the animal site registry because that's where all the confusion and misunderstanding has been. But I ask you to look at the form and see for yourself. Next slide. Why an animal site registry? The Board of Health's primary focus is on public health, so we need to be prepared. Information is key to that, and it makes sense for the Board of Health to have a good handle on where the livestock are in town, including for handling livestock incident calls. Board of Health is the primary first responder for incident calls, and we've had 60 since July 1st, and ensuring that all animal sites in town go through the state-required barn book inspection process. In fact, we do know that a lot of sites, probably mostly backyard or hobby farmers, have not met the state requirement for inspection. In fact, the animal site registry is already working. Between the animal site registry and the Board of Health outreach, we've had a 38% increase in barn book inspections from 2018 to 2019. So we have had 153 barn book inspections compared to 111 the year before. And this was the first year the animal inspectors were under the Board of Health. Registration works. It's efficient and non-intrusive. In fact, it documents the full scope, will document the full scope of livestock farming in town, so we can get a good picture, help promote agriculture, maybe apply for grants when we have more detailed information about, in total, how many animals are in town, because I think we know that there are a lot. So far, we've had 82 sites registered, and as one farmer said when he submitted his registration form, it's no big deal. There's a lot more information that I don't have time for, so the Board of Health is here to answer questions at any time after the presentation. So how we got here is the next slide, please. It was a multi-year process to come up with consensus recommendations through the Animal Action Committee convened by the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Health then developed a tenant farm regulation, assumed oversight of the animal control officers, and beefed up coverage for animal control so that we actually now have 24/7 on-call coverage. This regulation was the last step in the process. The committee, which included representatives from the farm and AgCom, as well as animal welfare advocates, was led by Phil Weinberg, our chair, who put many, many hours into this and solicited input all along the way. We had what we thought was a general agreement with all representatives right up until the first public hearing. We then heard a lot of concern and opposition, so we listened, we took that input, and pared back to the absolute minimum to ensure the town would have better and more complete information on where livestock were located in town. It was never our intention to disrespect farmers. We were trying to do the right thing. And it is true, the Board of Health regulations can be unpopular, especially with individuals being regulated. But our job is to protect the greater public health and interest. We tried to strike the right balance, and we tried to do it in an open and honest fashion. Next slide. Specifically to the warrant articles, those were read to you. I won't just summarize. The first change, no requirement to license, register, permit, or pre-approve keeping of livestock. This language conflicts with all lawful Board of Health livestock regulations at the local level, except for the tenant farm regulation, which stays specifically excluded. We've had a swine and piggery regulation in town since 1974. It was most recently amended in 2018 with no objections, including from AgCom. But in fact, there is a state statute that requires, not just voluntary, requires boards of health to hold a public hearing before issuing a site permit for any piggery in town. So this proposed amendment to the right to farm bylaw stands in direct conflict. In 2002, we've had equine regulations for almost 20 years, again, most recently amended in 2012, and then the animal site registry, which was adopted in 2019. The second proposed change was about may require a livestock census by AgCom. So what that means is we agree that it's valuable to collect the data. Where we disagree is who should do it and the fact that the Board of Health should not be allowed to have access to it, except for the animal inspectors. And I should note a voluntary or optional census with no regulatory backing is likely to be very incomplete. Because the proposal specifically excludes the Board of Health from the list of entities who could get the information, we are in a bit of a pickle. AgCom does not have the staff, legal authority, or expertise to deal with disease outbreaks or quarantines. So this approach doesn't make sense from a public health perspective. Proposed changes 3 and 4, which are the third and fourth paragraphs. Again, this ignores the Board of Health statutory authority to enact livestock regulations, including the piggery I just mentioned. That statute specifically directs us to, as well as others mentioned. So the state law already gives the Board of Health authority for all of our regulations, including the animal site registry. Setting up the right to farm bylaw with these amendments would stand in direct conflict with our statutory authority, which will create confusion for agencies and farmers and likely will increase conflict and potential legal costs. Next slide. So again, just to summarize the Board of Health authority under state law, you can read it up there. I will also mention Chapter 111, Section 155 about stables, also goes on to say, boards of health may make regulations on drainage, ventilation, size, and character of stall, number of animals, storage, and handling of manure. That is in state statute. There are others, but we'll skip over those. Next slide. Briefly, legal considerations. Town council opinion letter was discussed at a Board of Selectmen meeting and is posted online, so I hope everyone has had a chance to review it. And if you have questions through the moderator, you can ask town council to speak.
You're at 9 minutes now, so 1
Okay.
minute remaining.
We also asked the Mass Association of Health Boards to review the regulation and the petition to amend, and they concurred with town council. I'm going to skip over the next couple slides. They gave us a whole long presentation. I was taking 2, but we'll skip. And I should mention, they also mentioned the model keeping of animals regulation developed jointly by the Mass Association of Health Boards and the Massachusetts Farm Bureau. Current bylaw.
20 seconds left.
Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. Next slide. Nope, there was a slide in between. There's with a picture.
All right, you
There
can
we
have
go.
some extra time for my failure
Okay.
to switch.
31 towns in southeastern Massachusetts have livestock regulations. 17 of them have comprehensive, all domestic animals. And you'll notice all the towns in green are right to farm communities, so there's plenty with regulations, including Dartmouth and Fairhaven.
That now is the 10 minutes, even with some extra time for my slide changing. So to be fair to everyone, I have
Okay.
to ask you to finish.
Thank you.
So, the question is now open for general discussion. Mr. Vieira.
Mr. Moderator, I rise in support of Article 3 And I do that, and I'd like to inform town meeting that the farming community has worked, and I think you'll hear tonight, with others, Board of Health and animal activists in town, to try to arrive at a solution because of the tenant farming issue in town. And I think the activists, animal activists in town should be applauded for the work that they did when many town agencies weren't stepping to the plate on that issue and correcting it. But as far as the Board of Health is concerned and what we're trying to do going forward, they pointed out, they had them up on the screen, they had the regulations that weren't in force. We had a piggery when that was going on. We had a kennel license when that was going on. We had a stable license when that was going on. But we still had the problems. So I think more regulations doesn't solve the problem. Accountability and transparency in government will solve the problem. The Massachusetts agricultural community for years have been involved with the bond books. The bond books aren't anything fancy, folks. This is what they look like. Almost looks like if you get a ticket when you're driving. That's what my bond books looks like. Every year, people have been doing that. My dad did that for years. Mr. Poddington did that for years. Bob Wood did that for years.
Remember the personal speech thing.
I use those three names because I think that'll ring home with a lot of people in the audience in terms of the
Okay,
quality.
I'd still ask you not to use the names.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the names that were not being used, I think will suggest that we have some people within our community that got this right. We got a little off kilter with the tenant farming, people not from Westport. And we have, as you see those regulations that are presently in force, we have an agricultural commission that this town meeting voted on. If the town body would start working a little closer with the agricultural commission, we can get the census, the same census that we have here that we fill out each year. And we can work with communities. You're going to have complaints. People are going to be moving into a community saying we don't like the chickens next door, we don't like the horse next door, and we have to work that out as a community. This never shouldn't have been at town meeting. And I don't fault the Board of Health for it. They're new to those positions. They were trying to work something through. I don't fault the animal activists for it. But I do think we have to say enough is enough. We have government regulations. If you're a local farmer, you know what that's like. Let's not turn our community off to having a backyard, whether it's 3, 4, or 5 acres, or whether it's a large farm, to keep a few animals for their youngsters. Wouldn't you rather see your youngsters and your grandchildren outside dealing with some chores after school as opposed to sitting down at a TV or playing with a computer? That's what people come to Westport for, the way of life, our community. Let's not give that up. Let's be respectful of the various groups. Don't be upset because there were a group of people that got active in this town because the town wasn't dealing with what they should have been dealing with as a community. But the reaction is not passing more government regulations when we weren't enforcing the regulations that are presently in place that served our town for over 60 years with 3 people that I mentioned serving that, doing the job right. We can do that. All you have to do is reach out to the Ag Commission. We'll give you names. Half of the people you listed there for the registry are people that I asked to sign up because they're on bond books anyways. I said, this isn't a problem, it's a census. And the next time I found out about it, well, I started looking to other communities. Town of Somerset was up there, it's right up there on the screen. What is it, like $25 to keep one chicken in Somerset now? This weekend, the media was talking about a situation where a person had to put up a fence and had to, I think he had 2 donkeys, and he had to put up a 6-foot fence, and he had to, I guess, instruct the donkeys not to make any noise after 5 o'clock at night or something. How ridiculous are we going to be? You came to this town, we welcome you to this town, but work with us a little bit, because we are a right to farm community. Thank you.
Sir?
My name is Roger Menard. I'm chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm here only to talk about redefining the word farm. I want everybody to understand that that will have unintentional consequences. A couple of years ago, the town voted in favor of adding agri-tourism and agri-entertainment. What that was meant to do was allow things like farms to hold events like weddings, special events, farm-related experiences to help the expenses of the farm. By allowing everybody who has a chicken in their backyard, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that means that everybody who now has a couple of chickens in their backyard would be under the provisions of the agritourism and the agri-entertainment provisions. So they could then have weddings, and they could have any specially related events on their property, and that would be a by right procedure that is not currently allowed. So I just want everybody to understand that changing the word farm has a very significant difference to zoning bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. And by my records, this gentleman was next on the left. Sir? You're next.
Me?
Yes.
That was actually his pen. Sorry for the confusion there. My name is Lawrence Holsworth, and I just wanted to share some thoughts that I've put together concerning Article 3. I'm a fairly recent incomer to Westport. I'm not Westport born and bred. I come from a background of homesteaders, farmers, and fruit growers. And I spent my childhood on a farm. I don't currently own any animals or keep any livestock. But I would also just like to say that, you know, like any decent person, I was completely shocked and horrified by what happened on that so-called farm off of 177 a few years ago. And I was also very glad to see that there were some concerned citizens who were willing to devote their time and energy in the pursuit of justice to be delivered on those perpetrators. And I just want to, I see a couple of people here that I recognize from that group, and I just want to, you know, thank you, publicly say thank you for your time on that. As others have pointed out, those folks weren't actually from Westport, and they had nothing to do with either farming or the keeping of livestock in Westport either, as it transpires. So, you know, everything seemed to be kind of being taken care of. There were actions being taken by the town government and town departments to fix the regulatory and the oversight omissions that had allowed that incident to take place in the first place. You know, we have new members of boards and new inspectors and so on and so forth. Then this whole animal site registry furor kicked off. And I have to say, you know, initially I was quite put off by a lot of the cherry picking of data and the hyperbole surrounding the issue. But as I had friends and acquaintances on both sides of the issue, I wanted to get to the bottom of it. So I got involved in discussions, and I kept asking questions and seeking the facts. That eventually led me to a link to the video of the meeting on December 11th of last year that featured Mr. Mike Cahill, who is the director.
I'm going to ask you to please not name names. You're welcome to
Roger that,
reference
sorry.
people by their role.
Yep,
But
roger that,
try
sorry.
to keep it not personal. Thanks.
I'm reading from my previously written notes and forgot that point of order, so thank you. The director of Massachusetts Department of Health and, the Department of Agricultural Resources, MDAR for short. Taking the time to watch that entire hour-and-a-half video was probably the most productive use of my time that I've spent in this whole process. It was full of factual information delivered straight from the horse's mouth, and it led to a bit of a road to Damascus moment for myself. So here are some pertinent facts that I'd like to share from that. Some of which have already been covered by other presentations, but I'd like to reinforce those. So one of the things that the director pointed out was simply having a registry does not guarantee that every site which should receive a barn book inspection would actually get captured and be included in that process. With a registry or not, the most effective way to ensure that livestock sites are inspected is to have a diligent and effective municipal animal inspector who knows the town and knows what he or she is doing. It was also noted at a separate point in time during that discussion that the number of properties currently now in the barn book inspection list has increased something like fourfold in the last 4 years. And this is no doubt due to the efforts of our new municipal animal inspector, publicity about the incident on 177, involvement of local members of the AgCom and the farming community, and even also the Board of Health members publicizing it and the need for it and so on and so forth. So it's actually a good example of people pulling together, working together, doing what they should do, and doing it in the manner that it needs to be done and achieving the desired results. And with regards to the question of whether the Board of Health actually has the authority to mandate an animal registry, they do. This was pointed out by the director of MDAR himself. It's been pointed out and shown here book, chapter, and verse as well, where and how and why it applies. It does indeed have the authority under Massachusetts statutory law to enact an animal site registry. Then went on to explain, as we've seen also, approximately half the towns within the jurisdiction of his department do have such a livestock registry in place, and approximately
You have 20 seconds remaining.
approximately half of them don't. The point of all of this being, of course, that alone does not guarantee we get the kind of oversight that is required. What really works is when people come together, work together, and do what they need to do effectively. And with that said, I stand with the farmers of this community.
Your time's expired. Thanks. Ms. Goldberg?
My name is Wendy Goldberg.
I don't think we can hear you. Can that mic be lowered down, or can you stand on your toes? Or?
I am not so tall. Can you hear me now?
That's good. Yeah.
My name is Wendy Goldberg. My question is for Town Council. Article 3 states that, quote, the town may require a livestock census, unquote, giving the town permission to conduct a livestock census. Does this mean that the town may just as likely choose not to conduct a census, thereby leaving us with nothing in place to determine the location of livestock on any new livestock holding properties or on the many properties that have never been included in the state's annual barn book inspection?
So would it be an accurate paraphrase of your question to say, to ask, does the proposed bylaw amendment leave the town the option to either enact a census or not?
Yes.
Mr. Eichmann?
Mr. Moderator, through you, the answer to that question is yes, it does leave the town the option.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Constance Gee. Is this on? Constance Gee. Mr. Moderator, I have a question for Town Council through you.
What is your question, please?
In the document you provided, the Select Board, you state that should this amendment pass special town meeting and should the Attorney General allow it to stand, the town may well be subject to lawsuits. Could you please explain what kinds of conflicts might likely emerge that would have to be settled in court? What are the legal repercussions of the latest revisions the petitioners have proposed? And what impacts on the authority and responsibilities of other town agencies might Article 3 have?
Okay, so that sounded like three questions. The first is, what is the legal exposure to the town, in his opinion, if this passes?
Yes, not only in the opinion that he wrote, but also adding on the new,
Okay,
the
so
revisions.
the
Yes.
motion as it's before us now.
Pardon?
The motion as it's before the meeting now, which
Yes,
includes the
yes.
small changes that will.
Yeah, what are the legal issues that might emerge for the
Mr.
town?
Eichmann, can you tell us what legal exposure you, in your opinion, the town may be subject to if this passes?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you again, it's impossible to completely predict what the town's exposure is here. The risk is that you will have a bylaw that conflicts with the Board of Health regulation that could lead to any type of legal action brought to make effective or to enforce either one of those regulations. As to the scope of that, again, it's impossible to predict. It'd be left up to the person bringing the claim.
Does that answer that part of your question adequately?
Somewhat, thank you. Also, can you explain what kind of impact on the authority and responsibilities of other town agencies that this article might have? Because it basically takes away any sort of regulatory oversight from all town
Yeah,
agencies.
yeah, I think some people are having difficulty hearing you.
The Article 3 basically takes away all regulatory responsibilities concerning livestock, not only from the Board of Health, but other agencies within the town as well. It does leave the zoning officer, his duties intact. My question is, where do you see that, how do you see that playing out? And does it just make it so that no agencies in town basically have home rule or any sort of authority over livestock operations?
So is your question, does the motion under Article 3, if adopted, eliminate any authority of any town agencies over livestock?
Yes, in terms of anything that differs in anything from state law.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand.
Go ahead, the first one's fine, just go ahead.
So, Mr. Eichmann, can you tell us?
Yes, Mr. Ryder, through you again. I think I understand the question as you stated it. And I think the actual proposed motion here answers that question, where it says that there will be no inspections that deviate in any way from existing Massachusetts general law. So I think in that sense, it maintains the authority under those general laws. When you follow that in the paragraph, it also exempts expressly the building inspector and the Board of Health. So it certainly raises a question as to what the preceding paragraph saying the town shall not do. When you read those paragraphs, it indicates that all existing authority will remain in effect. So I think it raises a question as to what the effect of this law will be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Loesch, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Jane Lose. I have a question through you to the Town Council, and it follows up a comment by a previous speaker, and it concerns the definition of a farm. I noticed that under the proposed amendment, it transforms any parcel of land, no matter how small, into a farm if it is used primarily to raise livestock or grow crops. This is very different than the definition under 61A, which is currently referenced in the Westport's right to farm bylaw, meaning that the farm must be at least 5 acres and have annual revenue of at least $500. So what would be the impact? First of all, what is the definition of parcel? Does it have a legal definition like you do with lots and plats and whatever? Is a parcel a legally definable description of what a piece of land is? Is it not the land in which you have a tax assessment against the whole thing, or is a parcel a parcel? And does this refer to a parcel, or does it refer to that other larger?
So your question is, what is the legal definition of a parcel?
Yes.
Mr. Eichmann, can you answer that for us?
Yeah. Yes, through you, Mr. Moderator. The use of the word parcel in the general bylaws would have to be defined specifically in the general bylaws. It does not have a legal definition that controls all uses of that word. So if there is no definition, it would be left to those attempting to apply this bylaw to interpret that definition.
So when we have, for example, a piggery, if a piggery is made possible for someone with a small parcel, that means, because of the way our zoning is, we have residential and commercial mixed all together. So anybody could do anything on a little small parcel rather than a farm, which is defined by Chapter 61A as being at least 5 acres and have an annual revenue of at least $500. Is that correct, that anyone could do anything on a parcel defined in any way?
So that is a question for town council.
Yes.
And he explained that there is no definition for parcel, so the parcel would then be defined by whoever interprets the bylaw locally. Is that correct?
Mr. Moderator, yes, but I think there's one point that should be made here. This is not a zoning bylaw amendment. This is a general bylaw. This cannot amend the zoning bylaws or the definitions therein. So the zoning bylaw will continue to apply exactly as it is now.
And the right to, do I have time for one last question?
Yes, you do.
Okay, under the definition of farm being reduced to at least 5 acres, it's reduced from 5 acres to anything that somebody might interpret. Does that leave open that possibility that I raised? And if in fact the Board of Health interprets farm one way and the Agriculture Commission interprets parcel in another way, how does that get resolved?
Mr. Eichmann, can you tell us if the Board of Health interprets parcel one way and the AgCom another, how that would be resolved?
I don't have an easy answer for that. The Board of Health, as we've opined, has its own independent jurisdiction and would interpret parcels as it saw fit within that jurisdiction. This doesn't really give the Board of Health a role, this bylaw. The Board of Health is operating on its own. So the AgCom would have to interpret parcel as it saw fit under this bylaw.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Elias, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Ray Elias. I stand in support of the amendments to Article 3. It has been stated by the Westport Land Trust in the past, in the media, and in front of various town committees, that 45 to 70 acres of farmland is lost each day in New England. The town of Westport and this body has overwhelmingly supported agriculture in the past, from the early 80s.
Can you speak a little bit more directly into the mic?
From the early 80s to the present. Preserving farms throughout Westport. Today, there are many small parcels of open space scattered throughout the town, protected by individual owners with 15, 20, 40 acres or more, with their own dime. They do so because they enjoy farming, to help support family, community, and a way of life in Westport. What does this body think will happen to these parcels when they are no longer farmed? The Land Trust or the town of Westport are not going to buy them all. As a member of AgCom and an active farmer raising livestock, let's keep them farming and support the right of farm amendments for Article 3. In the 2004 town warrant, which was the right to farms came in front of the town to be approved. The Ag Commission was appointed in 2001, unanimously voted by this body. In 2004, they drafted the right to farm bylaw as it presently stands now. I would like to read a scripture from that time frame in the town's warrant. And if I can use 2 names, I would like to, because they're deceased and they're no longer with us.
I'm still going to ask you, just in the name of fairness, to try and call them local farmers,
All right,
esteemed
I'll describe
members
them
of
so
our
that the
community,
people
or
in the
something
room
along
will
those
know
lines.
who they are.
But I'm also going to ask you not to mock me in the meeting by trying to sneak around
I'm
that
sorry,
rule.
Mr.
Thanks.
Moderator. I am sorry. I apologize. During the past year, we said goodbye to 2 original members of the Ag Commission. One of them, a lot of the children play soccer on the fields today. The other was a previous town assessor. Farmers, both of them. Their wisdom, experience, and humor were a great asset to the AgCom. They are very well missed. The goal of the AgCom during 2004's town warrant includes mediation between farmers and town boards and state agencies. When complaints are registered by residents to town boards or other agencies regarding agricultural activities, the AgCom immediately appoints 2 or 3 peers to get involved. The team works with the farmer, board members, and town staff to educate where needed and to reach a consensus if at all possible. Westport AgCom has been quite successful with this goal, thanks to the hard work of its members and a commitment to the town boards to work together for the greater good of Westport. Communication is productive, not decisive. I urge you to pass the amendments to Article 3. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Before the next speaker, our attendance for tonight is Precinct A 64, Precinct B 248, Precinct C 60, Precinct D 96, Precinct E 182, for a total of 650. And Mr. Mundell, you are next, and then we will go to the other side.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Sam Mundell again. Yes, of course, sorry. It's my privilege to be here and to see everybody come out to participate in what's really the democratic process. There's a lot of discussion tonight about the conflicts associated with the bylaw amendment, conflicts. I hear that all the time. I've been participating in this for months now, and to be totally transparent, I'm the primary author of the bylaw amendment, so I do have a pretty good handle on what it says. And I wrote it with some of my colleagues, and importantly with outside counsel at Partridge, Snow and Hahn, who unfortunately had to go to another meeting. He was here earlier, but he did produce a memo outlining our opinions on the bylaw amendment, and that's been in the papers. I hope some of you have seen that, and I'm not going to bore the audience with it. But look, there's no question that we have a conflict. That's why we're here. We have a right to farm in the state of Massachusetts. It's in the Massachusetts Constitution. That establishes something that's reserved for us. That right to farm is further advanced through our own existing bylaw. Again, a right that's reserved for us. By definition, that is a limitation on town's authority to regulate us. Now, what we've said in the bylaw amendment is very crystal clear. We recognize that the town has certain regulatory authority to inspect our farms, and we do not expect that to change. We recognize that the state, through the Barn Book inspection, has the authority to inspect our farms annually, and we do not expect that to change. The only thing, the two things that we are changing in the bylaw that are material are, first, the definition of the farm, which one of the previous speakers talked about at length, and town council has also discussed. And for the record, that change from 5 acres to a no acreage requirement was lifted directly out of existing bylaws from many towns in the Commonwealth, including Dartmouth, just to our east. So that's settled law that's allowed to exist in the right to farm bylaws in the Commonwealth. We don't need to debate it. It's already been approved by the Attorney General. And the second place where we want to change the Board of Health and other boards of authority is more material, in my opinion, and that's on the permission. We cannot have a right to farm if we need the Board of Health or another board's permission to pursue our activity. We acknowledge that we have to pursue our right with certain standards and certain inspectional regimes, but we should not need permission or to register our activities in order to pursue our right. Thank you.
Ma'am?
Hi, Cynthia Anderson from Gifford Road. Our experience with the Board of
Can you
Health...
speak a little more directly into the microphone? Thanks.
Our experience with the Board of Health has been we are very upfront in registering our animals. We've been having the animal, I don't know, the one, resource, whatever, comes out, animal control, come out for years now and and come to our property and ask us what animals we have on our property. We've been up front. I think there was even a fellow from the transfer station that they had come around one year. We were up front. He came on our property. I think our problem is that last year when we went for to register our barn, and we paid $40, filled out the forms, but when it came to, and then the Board of Health is supposed to send somebody out and then give you your permit. Well, no one from the Board of Health came out for the longest time, and so we went to the Board of Health and said, hey, we paid our $40, where's our permit? And we were told that they were very backed up, and that and we'll just sign it and you can take it. So that's what they did. They signed it and we took it. There was no barn inspection done at that time that we paid for. And so if you are expecting the Board of Health to be, not get you into the same situation as 177, then there needs to be a little more control on the Board of Health and a little more accountability on them, instead of putting more and more rules on people that follow directions, love their animals, take care of their animals. My husband and I take in kids that need a break, that everybody else has kind of like had it with them, so they come and they're not allowed any electronics when they come. Most of them don't know the difference between a duck and a chicken, and I'm not kidding, or even a horse from a cow. That's how bad things have gotten with a lot of kids. And when they leave, they are enriched. And not only from the farm, they go to the beach, and Westport has so many resources that we're so lucky to have. But if we're just gonna go and ruin our community by dividing, instead of working at something to unite us and be proud of our farms, I mean, who doesn't like to go by and see a horse out in the yard, or in a group of cows that are just, waiting at the barn to come in at night? Or even chickens, where you go into the chicken coop at night and you just hear the quiet coo of them, just resting. That's what kids need. That's what families need. That's what a community needs. We don't need to be bylawed and restricted and have people come onto our properties when it said, what does it say, that they don't have to even announce, they can just come on your property unannounced? That? How fair is that? If you have, what makes you think that if they can do this, that you don't have to? They'll say, oh, we're going to start checking on dogs and cats, which are the most abused animals. And what makes you think that they can't just come in and do that, restrict you on how many animals you have in your home? I mean, how can you tell the difference? You have to register a bunny rabbit, but you don't have to register a ferret? I don't understand a lot of these rules that our law, the bylaws now. We should be a community of common sense, not just restricting, going on properties and just have the town law come in. And believe me, the town is not fun to deal with when you have a problem with them. Thank you.
My name's John Bullard. Live in Nick's Way. I'm still new in town, just been here 8 years. I grew up on a farm in Dartmouth. We raised beef, cattle, and chickens. We sold beef and eggs for people to eat. And I'm still, as I said, new here, and I rise in opposition to this motion, but I really do consider myself pro-farm. And I'm confused about how I can be pro-farm and in opposition to this. And I think there is something underneath this. I've spent a lot of my life in government, and I know I regulated fishermen. I've been in a lot of positions where I am the evil person from government. and I was mayor of New Bedford, and I know how to count votes. And yet, I still rise in opposition to this motion. And I listened to the presentation by the Board of Health, and I don't think a registry, as I understand the presentation, is requiring permission. So I see what seems to me a misunderstanding. There's a registry, and if it's the Board of Health, it's not voluntary. It means we would know where all the animals are in Westport, and I wonder, why is that not a good thing if we are pro-farm, to know where all the animals are? I helped with the first speaker, and other local farmers found CMAP in 2000 to promote local farmers. I helped, not in a minor way, create Meatworks to provide a local slaughterhouse, because if you're going to have food, you need to slaughter animals. And we didn't have a local slaughterhouse. And we try and buy local foods. I think the reason I think we should have a registry by the Board of Health is to maintain confidence in the safety of local food by making sure that all local farms, every single one of them, have access, instantaneous access, to fast-breaking threats from disease. We're all nervous now about the coronavirus. We ought to make sure that no one's having to dig around wondering, where's a farm? How do I get information out to every single farm? The Board of Health ought to know that. They have staff, they have information. They ought to be able, with one touch of a computer keystroke, to get information to people who are selling food. That's what farms that raise animals do. I mean, you're in business to sell food to people, to know what the threats are. So I think a registry doesn't tell you can't raise animals. It doesn't tell you can't farm. It doesn't infringe on the ability to be a farmer. I couldn't agree more with what the first speaker said about the advantages of raising kids on farms. I grew up on a farm. I couldn't agree more with what the first speaker said about the advantage. That's why we moved here, that sign that said right to farm. But I don't think this motion gets us in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator.
Sir, you're next.
Hello, I'm Phil Weinberg. There has been a lot of talk about the animal site registry, and it was clear that the adoption by the board of the registry, directly resulted in this petition. But the way that the petition is written goes far beyond the registry and goes to the issue that one of the previous speakers mentioned, which is, are there any situations in keeping of livestock where permission is required? And we have two of those that have been in effect for a very long time, and it's been mentioned, and it is supported by state statute, which is relative to equines and swine. And it's very clear from the language of the petition that those would be banned. And I think that is a consequence that is not appropriate. Those are specifically designed to protect public health from a preventative point of view, and they have conditions and standards in them which are designed to protect public health. And even in my relatively brief period of time on the board, the existence of those regulations were necessary to protect situations where quarantines had to be imposed. So you're not voting here just on the question of whether the registry should go forward, but whether you are really preventing the Board of Health from doing the job that, that it's supposed to be doing. And in regard to the second, one of the other provisions about how there is nothing that the board can do by regulation, inspection, procedures, guidelines that deviate in any way from state law, I just have to say, having had a long career, I don't actually really know exactly what that means. I wouldn't know as a Board of Health member what exactly any restriction that deviates in any way from state law would be. And I don't think any farmer would know. At least now we have some reasonable expectations based in our regulations. And I think it's, instead of reducing conflict, we are going to get situations where there's going to be disagreements. Now, we've worked really close with the Agricultural Commission since my tenure on the board, and the registry is designed specifically to call in the Agricultural Commission in the event there's any conflict between its implementation. So it's designed as a conflict resolution rather than as a conflict creating mechanism. And it is designed to bring in all the sites that have not been inspected and other sites that might come in to get inspected under the state inspection program. Because whatever you might want to say about, the Maderos farm and who was to blame and otherwise, it was really a result that the site didn't get inspected. And this is really designed to bring sites in so that they can go through the state-sponsored barn book inspection. So I would just ask people to give the registry a chance, okay? It's only been in effect for a short while. We've heard a lot of the horrible things that could happen, but I don't think they are going to happen. I think we are going to work together and to work this out in a way that really makes sense. I've sat down in the living rooms and in the kitchens of the petitioners who wrote this who wrote the site register, who wrote this petition to try to work things out.
40 seconds remain.
To try to work things out. And I think we can work things out. But I think adoption of this petition is just going in the wrong way and will lead to more conflict than less. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, you were next.
My name is Bill Battles. I live on Pine Hill Road. And
Yeah, maybe if you can raise that up for your height.
my name is Bill Battles, and I am in support of Article 3. And one of the things with the Board of Health having control of the regulation is our information is not protected. If under barn books, our information is protected by statutory law, and no one can get that information unless they go through court. With Board of Health, that is open public information. Anyone can have that information anytime they want. So our information is not protected from anyone. And we moved into town in 2005, and one of the reasons we moved into town is the right to farm community, and we lived on the Cape. And on the Cape, you need permission to do everything. It's overregulated. One of the reasons Westport was nice, it's not overregulated. If we let the Board of Health Animal Site Registry stay in place, that regulation will grow, like any regulation that government gets. They get their foot in the door, and the next thing you know, we have the regulation they squashed over the fall, because that's what will happen to this regulation if it's not fought. And as Americans, we are losing our rights every day through over-government regulation. So I have to say thank you.
So you're next.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, and thank you. I'd like to start by clarifying
You
some
identify
fact-
yourself, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ronald Laprise. Thanks. I'd like to start by clarifying some facts that were presented tonight in the slideshow. The document that we were handed out that's labeled Animal Site Registration Form is not the actual form. The contents on the back is not part of the form. Further, it states in the contents of the back it's a one-page form. In the truest sense, in the factual sense, it's not. On the subject matter, in the opening paragraph, if you read the last sentence, a copy of the regulation is available at the office or online. I feel it should have been presented tonight so anybody getting involved for the first time understands it's a 5-page document, not a single-page document. The second 4 that weren't provided for your use, item number 2 is purpose. And I'd like to start by clarifying, unfortunately I lost some of my time, tonight's really about our constitutional rights and our laws in Mass General Law. Pursuant to our constitutional Fourth Amendment, which I quote, the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures, end quote. As stated before, the Board of Health Animal Registration and Regulation has no purpose. On face value, the purpose is defined in 2 parts. Part 1, and I quote, this regulation has been enacted to ensure that the locations where animals are kept in the town of Westport are known to the public officials responsible for the protection of public health and safety and emergency planning, end quote. Well, in fact, the people in charge of that is MDR and our first responders, police and fire. They have had and continue to have this information. They've had it all along. I'll move to part 2 of the Animal Regulation Registration purpose. And I quote, help ensure that these sites are inspected in accordance with Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources Livestock Inspection Program, Bond Book. The purpose of which is to ensure the health and safety of the animals and to provide that said animals are kept in a manner under the conditions that will not cause harm or the threat of harm to the public health and safety, end quote. The Board of Health has informed you that their alleged purpose is actually done by MDR, which we've been stating all along. However, MDR cannot accept their help. I know they want to help, but they can't accept their help. And the reason they can't accept their help is the director of MDR came down and provided information to the Board of Health and to the public in December. And a piece of the information provided, and I will quote, this information we collect is specifically exempt from public record, end quote. Specifically exempt. They have no right to it. Based solely on these facts, as I stated before, the Board of Health has no purpose. This regulation, the registration, has no purpose. It never has. We brought this up before. It's going unheard. Lastly, and I'll end with this, as farmers, I've heard the question, what do we have to hide? What are we afraid of? Well, I can only tell you what I have to hide. What I have to hide is my Fourth Amendment. And I quote, my persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches. What I'm afraid of? I'm afraid that if this continues, that the streets and the woodlands of Westport will be littered with private property, no trespassing signs. And by doing this, I'm afraid that the children of Westport that currently ride their quads in my woods, build forts in my woods, go camping in my woods, play in my woods, catch frogs and snakes in the brooks, will no longer be allowed. But what I'm most afraid of is that in the future, the citizens of Westport would put up with the audacity that any board has to try and take away our constitutional or general laws. In
40
closing,
seconds-
the Westport
40 seconds
Board,
remaining.
In closing, the Westport Board of Health inspected the 177 tenant farm prior to making the news. The result speaks for itself. I'll leave with, we must support the Westport sustainable farmers, as we have never, nor we will ever, do anything wrong. Thank you.
Ma'am, you're next.
Call the question, Mr. Moderator, please.
Okay. So, a motion to call the question puts before us the question of whether we want to continue with discussion or not. So is there a second to that motion? Okay, so we have a motion and a second to call the question. So we're going to vote in just a minute about whether we want to hear more discussion on this topic or not. So a yes vote would mean that you know how you want to vote on motion under Article 3. You don't need to hear any more discussion, and you're ready to proceed to a vote.
Point of order.
Yes?
I was next in line.
And the person before you moved to call the question. So the meeting is going to decide whether they want to hear more discussion or not. So a no vote on the motion to call the question would mean, no, you would like to hear more discussion before proceeding to a vote on Article 3. Is everyone clear on that? So I'm going to ask all those in favor of calling the question to please raise their hands. Those opposed? It's a pretty easy call. That is carried. So we will now move to a vote on the motion under Article 3. So all those in favor of the motion under Article 3 will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is carried. Article 4. To see if the town will vote to amend its bylaws and regulations regarding non-medical marijuana establishments as described. What is the point of order? There's more, but thank you for coming. May I ask those of you that are leaving to move out as quickly as you can so those of us who remain can finish our meeting. Thank you. What's that? Wait till we address the next couple of items. All right, we're going to continue the meeting, but I'm going to ask those of you who are leaving to please leave silently so that the rest of us can continue with our meeting. Thank you. I'm going to ask you again if you would please leave silently so that the rest of us who are staying can continue our meeting. Thank you. Article 4, to see if the town will vote to amend its bylaws and regulations regarding non-medical marijuana establishments as described in the article by petition. May I have a motion, please? Will you please offer us the courtesy of leaving quietly so the rest of us can continue our meeting? Thank you.
I move the motion to adopt the provisions of Article 4 as printed on the warrant.
So we have a motion to adopt the provisions of Article 4 as printed in the warrant. Is there a second? Thank you. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommended in favor 7-1 with one member absent.
Thank you. And we have a prearranged presentation. Would you like the slide?
Yes, please. Good evening. I'm Diego Bernal, represent the petitioners for Articles 4 through 10. Thank you very much for staying. I appreciate that. Long night. Hopefully it'll be short. And thank you for having your voices heard. I want to just briefly comment on what brought us here today. In November 2016, there was a state vote for legalization, and the state and the town, by majority, passed that vote. After that legalization vote happened, marijuana became legal in the Commonwealth, and then the state allowed the towns to move to some sort of moratorium to implement the legalization in a sort of more organized fashion, and our town voted for that temporary moratorium. In 2018, there was a town meeting where Articles 22 to 27 were proposed, and that was really relative to the concerns of this very new industry in our state. Article 22, specifically in May 2018, proposed a general bylaw that instilled a prohibition on all non-medical marijuana establishments. Articles 23 to 27 were zoning bylaw changes that were to be in place if that article failed. In other words, if prohibition failed, the town needed some zoning bylaws passed. But because it passed, the zoning bylaws were skipped. I want you to see the visual of what happened, why we're here. This is 2016, with 9,000 of our residents voting in that ballot initiative, with 53% in favor of legalization. This is 2018, where 200 people voted to prohibit. In other words, 200 people showed up, and 118 were in favor, 82 were against. 30 people margin is what passed the prohibition. Less than 1/4% of the residents of Westport passed this prohibition. So these are the facts. The articles proposed tonight will try to reinstate the overwhelming will of the people of residents of Westport from May of 2018, not just 1/4%. Articles 4, 5, and 6 intend to correct the unbalanced decision made in 2018 and offer new opportunities for the town, very important financial opportunities. There have been some concerns in our working groups and people that we've talked to in the town that these articles were brought to the town too quickly. 2 years from the first prohibition vote, it's not too quickly. We understand that the concerns in 2018 and the discussion that was happening based on the new industry where we didn't know what was happening. But now, 2 years later, we know what's happening. We can compare and we have data to see how this prohibition may have affected us. There are data from other towns that have non-medical facilities and establishments. We have information on their growing pains, what they did right, what they did wrong, so we don't do the same mistakes. We have information on the economic benefit that they have had, which has been really, really good. And we have information on the problems they have had, the impact on resources by having these establishments, and that's none or very little. There also has been some concern in town that we fast-tracked this at the special town meeting, that we're doing it in the back room. That's not the case. We followed every rule and procedure from the Commonwealth and the town to bring these to a public hearing, to have you listen to them and vote on them. We went through the select board and spoke to them with our petition. We went to the finance committee twice, and they voted on this. And we went to the planning board to make sure that we were not making any mistakes in our zoning proposals. And so we have been vetted through the process, and that's why we're here tonight. If we want to wait another 2 years to make our decision, well, that is going to be up to us tonight. Brief summary of what's going to happen right now, because I don't want to repeat myself 4 times tonight, so be patient with me quickly. Article 4 adds a paragraph to the existing bylaw but does not repeal the bylaw. It just kind of brings back the rules that were in place in 2016 by allowing the already established medical marijuana establishments in Westport to operate as medical and recreational. Article 5 eliminates language of prohibition because it prohibits all non-medical establishments and replaces it with the language of regulation, giving the town total control of what's going to happen. Article 6 is a complete repeal of that prohibition. That is, it's almost like starting from scratch, which means that if Article 6 passes, we have to go to Article 7 and 10, which are proposed zoning bylaw changes that will help the town with this potential new industry here. And the zoning bylaws that we're proposing, 7 through 10, are drafted exactly as the ones in May 2018 with a very small number of changes. They have been vetted by the planning board. So really, it's language from the planning board from 2 years ago that we're doing again, just in case the complete repeal passes. A brief summary of the warrants tonight. I want you to think about them this way. Articles 4 and 5 work together. by bringing us back to a November 2016 ballot drive, which the 4,000 people voted on and passed it. Article 5 replaces the language of prohibition with regulation, again, giving the town the ability to regulate this industry. What does prohibition mean to the town? It is a very blanket statement. It means that everything is prohibited that's non-medical. It means no medical laboratories for testing facilities, no manufacturers, no cultivators, no craft cultivators. That extends to the people that were hopefully still in this room. No retailers, no industry of any type that's non-medical. And if we want to move forward, we should be able to regulate who and how they come into the town. Our town really has to take advantage of this significant opportunity that I'm going to present in a second. It's a legal emerging market that we're missing out on. What happens if Article 4 or 5 passes? The sky's not going to fall. There is extreme regulation by the Commonwealth, extreme regulation by the town, by the select board. They have to vet the applicants. The planning board has a say-so. There are multiple steps that I'm going to show you in a second. There is a long, multi-year process sometimes to get this to the point where the town is happy with what's going to happen. So really, there is a lot of control happening in here. Remember this if you remember something. There are strict rules and regulations in place to control all non-medical establishments that want to come to Westport. The Westport Select Board decides who comes to Westport. We elected them to be the gatekeepers, and that's their job. Who's going to come here depends on them. The Select Board decides the conditions of these establishments coming to Westport. If they don't abide by the Select Board's sort of what they want, they don't come to Westport. Westport decides what happens to Westport, not somebody else in a different county or town. It is us. Sorry, don't read that. But this is just to show you that for us to come to number 7, which is operations, we're going through local controls, state controls, back to local controls, back to state controls, back to local controls, back to state controls, and then we operate. The select board starts the whole process. They have to see who's going to come into the town, and they have to say, yes, we're not going to oppose you coming in here. Now give us your plan. Then it goes back to the state, and the state does a licensing process. Then it comes back to the town, and the planning board does a special permit and site plan review. Then it goes back to the state to make sure that no rules were broken, that everything's good. Then it comes back to the town for an agreement. Then it goes back to the state. There are a lot of controls here. This is not an unregulated industry. It's quite regulated. But this is what it means to us.
You have a minute and a half left.
Oh, boy. Very important. The community host agreement is very important because there's a 3% local tax that comes back to Westport. There's also an impact fee that can be negotiated between the establishments in Westport to make sure that there is no extra expense occurred by Westport if these establishments come to town. There is a state match that can happen that ups it to 6% of gross sales, plus the impact fee. It is incredible. I'm going to skip because I'm going to run out of time. But we all know this. New fire station, new police station, new school. Our tax rate has been going up. Our tax rate is going to go up in fiscal 2021. We all know that. $509 million are made so far in this industry by the state of Massachusetts, and we're missing out on this one. I'll leave you with this one. Fall River, as an example, our nearest neighbor, they brought into their town $1.9 million in taxes, that if we take 30% of that into our town with new establishments, we can get $500,000 in tax revenue that can really help us. Finally, I just want to say that a yes vote for this one opens up the town to participate in this industry that's not unregulated and uncontrolled. A no vote is going to allow us to pay more taxes fiscal 21 and forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Leach?
Question to Town Council, to you, Mr. Moderator. Article 4 seems to allow basically only one group that's already been approved, unless we pass 5, 6, and 7 and through 10. In other words, I think it's regulating only one group is allowing one group should not the others attend, pass, almost like a spot zoning. So this group that's already got approval for a medical marijuana facility can now do this regardless of zoning, and it's only allowed for this one group. I just wanted an opinion as to if he believes this to be true.
So is your question to town council, does Article 4 as written open the opportunity for only one group to operate a non-medical facility in Westport?
Yes.
Mr. Eichmann?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, that is my interpretation of Article 4 as well. It exempts one specific group, and I understand in this case it's actually only one applicant from the existing prohibition against recreational marijuana.
Thank you.
Well, then my question is, I mean, doesn't that prejudice, if the other articles do not pass, basically does it prejudice any other person from doing this particular thing? And it's one group of
Well,
issues.
yeah, I think that was his answer, that it allows for one
Point of information?
one entity. There's no such thing as a point of information. Sorry, you will have an opportunity to speak in just.
Then I have a concern of passing Article 4, not knowing the future, because of that provision. It's only one particular person that will be benefiting from Article 4.
Okay, I'm going to do my best to do people in order here, but you all came up there so quickly, I didn't really get a good count. But I believe you were next. And if I'm
Thank
way
you,
wrong, please someone tell me.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Henry Swan. I live at 1958 Main Road. I'm not much danger of a facility being located next to me or anywhere in my neighborhood, I don't believe. However, I am very much opposed to this article. The previous speaker, the deliverer of this motion, I think stated that there was a narrow defeat of this type of article at a previous meeting, and it was a very small audience. Frankly, I think it's been defeated 3 times. How many times do you have to hear no before you give up? I checked with the town clerk's office yesterday to find that out. Now, why am I opposed to this? I'm opposed because this type of operation will tempt some of our children to take up marijuana before their brain has developed sufficiently to, to know what to do and when to quit. And there are plenty of examples that I am personally aware of, beginning when I went to my 45th college reunion. And there I met 2 classmates, 66 years old, looking after 2 of their grandchildren. Why were they looking after their grandchildren? Because their daughter was not able to take care of her children. And why was she not able to? Because she was an early marijuana smoker and got into other things. Excuse me. I've had 2 friends with grandchildren who have died of overdoses, one at 18 in the past year. He didn't start with fentanyl or anything else. He started with marijuana when he was under the age of 18, well under the age of 18. Now, he shouldn't have been doing it, but he was. And why was he doing it? Because it was available. Why do we want to make it more available for other children? I had another acquaintance I know of, died at 22 of an overdose. He left behind a 2-year-old who is now being looked after by his 80-year-old grandmother. How do you think that's going to work out? What did he start with? Marijuana.
And you know, I know you're not going to stop every kid from taking up marijuana at a too early age, but you might cut down a little bit if you don't have it available. The kid has to go away. Now, it's heavily regulated, so we don't have to worry. It's regulated by the state, the town, and so forth and so on. Well, I've got an interesting little article, June 26th of last year. Police are investigating a state road smoke shop. You know what that state road smoke shop was doing? It was selling vaping stuff, which of course some of it includes marijuana, to 12-year-olds. They were regulated. What was the punishment? They lost their license for 60 days, I think. I wonder if they took an appeal and got it back right away. It's still in operation. I know that people think we're all honest. Unfortunately, we're not all honest. We know what happens when people are pushed to make money. And the push is constant. And the more money that's available, the more they will push to get it. And I just hope that we can continue our tradition of saying no. If the kids want to go to
40 seconds remaining.
If the kids want to go to Dartmouth, if they want to go to Fall River, fine. I think the place in Fall River probably does wonders because people can go to the gambling casino with a little high maybe, and then when they lose all their money, they can get a little higher and come home. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Valcourt?
First of all, I want to answer a previous speaker's question about if this is specific to this only one business. It isn't. When we passed our medical marijuana regulations and bylaws, we put it in the restriction that there would be no more than 2 dispensaries in town. So this will apply to the one that is currently under application process and a second one that could possibly exist if we allowed it to. So it doesn't apply to just one single business. It applies to the 2 that we have allowed by previous meetings, town meetings. Secondly, I would like to address the inherent dishonest and uninformed opinion that marijuana is a gateway drug. Marijuana has been proven time and time again with empirical evidence to not be what is termed a gateway drug. The main causes of addiction and overdoses and such activities in the United States and all across the world are twofold. One is early childhood abuse. Early childhood abuse is the single highest driving factor dictating whether or not someone becomes addicted to a controlled substance or not. Early childhood abuse in every form, number 1. Number 2 is mental illness, often caused by early childhood abuse. So please educate yourself. Read it. Don't take my word for it. Read the research. Read the documentation. Early childhood abuse and mental illness are the highest single causes of addiction, and it's called self-medication, and people medicate themselves because they themselves are hurting inside, and there is no mental health system in this country that will help them out. Our state is currently passing a law, or trying to pass a law at the state level to allow access to mental health for all individuals in the Commonwealth. I strongly urge you to support that and support the efforts of our own senators, our own senator and our own, and our own
Let's keep it
representative in the
let's keep it
court.
to the question in front of us.
I urge you to support their efforts in this
Let's
matter.
keep it to the question in front of us.
Okay. I'll keep it to the question, but my single thought that I really want to leave you with is Every year that I have sat on this board, this is my 6th year on this board, every year I've sat on this board, we have had shortfalls. Those shortfalls are have been between, the most I think was close to $3 million. The least, this year is one of the least years, we're about $500,000 short. We want to add we want to add 2 police officers, 1 firefighter, several teachers, other staff on the highway department, staff in town hall offices, so that they can provide the services to you that you expect from this town. Providing those services every year, the cost of health care, the cost of fuel, the cost of materials, the cost of everything goes up every year at a greater rate than 2.5%, which is all that we're allowed to raise the tax rate without going to a full townwide meeting. We don't want to have to raise the tax rate every year. That's not our choice. We have to in order to meet the town's obligations and to meet the expectations that you have for this town to support farming, which we have supported with tens of millions of dollars in the form of APR restrictions and conservation restrictions and buying up development rights of farms, giving our farmers millions and millions of dollars to stay viable and to keep farming in this town. It is one of our single most highest priorities. And I know many people will say that we don't support farms because we didn't support this particular previous, but we did. And this is one of the ways in which we can continue to support farms, is if we have financial ability to fund the town fully and to fund sources like the CPA, the AgCom. We just asked to borrow another $1.5 million for the AgCom in order to help preserve farms. We just, if you want us to be able to pay our bills, I ask you to please support this. As has been presented before, there is a lot of cash that can come our way that the town needs desperately in order to keep the town functioning at a level, service level that you expect from us. Thank you.
Sir.
Alex Kropf. I stand opposed to Article 4. First, I resent petitioner's presentation of the 2 votes. The first vote with a 56% majority was a statewide vote in general on the question of marijuana use. It was not a vote on whether we want dispensaries or growing or any facility in our town. The second vote was a vote about our town. And that should always take precedence over what we decide in general on a statewide basis. Second, I'm very grateful that the petitioner raised the town of, or city of Fall River and the money that they made from revenue from pot dispensaries. Anyone who's followed the news has maybe heard about the situation in the awarding of licenses and probably the lawsuits that are following from the ones that were refused their licenses and are now suing the town. I wonder how all that beautiful revenue stacks up against the legal fees that the town is facing now. And lastly, to the last speaker, if the only way we can make our town budget is by selling recreational drugs in town, we're doing something wrong.
Mr. Moderator, this is a difficult one for me because I understand that there's some good people that are behind this petition here in this article. But it's difficult as a former selectman. I think the body should know that when I was a member of the selectmen, our board voted medical marijuana. We saw the advantages of that, and we recognized that our community should get on board with that. We tried to do that. We were assured by the people establishing medical marijuana that they had no intentions and they would never get involved with recreational marijuana. But that's what was said, and we're here tonight looking at it a little bit differently. And I understand it, things change. But I also, it's difficult for me because when I was in the service in 1968 to 1971, I saw the advantages of marijuana on patients. And I don't disagree with that. But I also saw the recreational part of marijuana and some Army folks in particular that had difficulties with it, and it did lead to other things for them. I'm not saying it's not going to be a problem, or it's going to be a problem. I'm saying I saw that, and it affected me. For many years, I was a college educator, and I was a dean of a college, and then I was dean at a university. And, you know, the story on campus, so to speak, was brains got fried. Not everybody's brain got fried, but some people came in with all kinds of opportunities and left kind of mellowed out. Now, that doesn't mean everybody's going to do that. That doesn't mean we don't have our own families involved in this at different locations. But I think our community, more than once, has been before town meeting saying, maybe this isn't right for our community. We're not recognizing you know, the fact that it doesn't exist. We're not recognizing people aren't growing it in their backyard. But do we have to add to that problem? And we have to have that available. And I know some people are saying we need it, and you know, if you drink, why can't you have marijuana in some form? I understand those arguments. But do we really need to do that? It comes down to the presentation tonight that it's revenue. And we need to do this because of revenue. I don't think people really understand the ramifications of people that are affected by this, the ones that I saw in my career, both in education and in the service, some negative effects that would have. The same way it has in alcohol, but even more so. So that's my opinion. I'm not trying to convince people one way or the other, but I'm not going to be supporting this for the reasons that I just spoke. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Good evening. My name is Jennifer DuPont. I know this is a very controversial topic, and I understand that it is controversial, and I appreciate everybody being in here today, past probably some of your bedtimes. And I just want to ask a couple questions. One question I have, and I'm not even sure who to ask it to, is I know that there have been some issues with parking in other facilities. How do we handle that in Westport?
Is there anyone who would like to volunteer an answer to how we would handle Mr. Valcourt?
The planning board will have a very, very detailed site review of any of these facilities, and they will require a level of parking that is commensurate with the amount of business that they would do. This is located on Route 6 in a not very populated area, and so the issues with parking that you have at the Fall River dispensary, which are, you know, an issue, but that is in the middle of where a casino and the largest
the answer is that would be part of site plan review by the planning board, and so the planning board would see to it that the parking was adequate.
Excellent.
Is there another question?
Just one comment. I know, you know, we're talking about marijuana, we're talking about the legal aspects of it. It is legal in the state of Massachusetts. It is legal, and the town did pass it during the ballot vote. So I think that we were misinformed by the last person who spoke, because we did pass it as a town for recreational. Take that as you wish. I'm you know, in support of this. And I do think that the revenue that can be made, I know that the medical facility has already been approved. It is already coming into town. So that same facility to do recreational will just double the revenue in our town. So I do support it, and I hope people will think about the revenue when you're thinking about a yes or no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Cecilia Delgadio. I am going to tell you the issue is the welfare. You can hear me. The issue is about the welfare of the community, not the revenue. I was told this by a new friend here, and I agree. Though it seems that many of you are interested in some short-term gain, which could have some very long-term ramifications. I'm concerned about a lot of issues. Money laundering. You've got 3 cash-based businesses located in the same proximity. Connection to the illegal weed industry. There is vaping crisis that has a connection through the CDC has put out in a Wall Street Journal article just this last month about the connection between weed shops and the vaping crisis. People go, I'm not going to get into that detail because I want to keep it about Westport, which already seems to have a problem with illegal weed, as we saw last summer with the marijuana parties linked to the Hells Angels on Route 177. From that incident, I read about how they handed out dabs, which I then looked up on what the dabs are, because a lot of us are older, And you know, it's not the marijuana that our grandparents smoked. Dabs create explosions in the making of this. Our detectives are aware of what's going on with the creation of these things. They were being given out at this party. They're very high in THC levels. Another concern of mine. Oh, and by the way, you just go to your local dispensary. I told you how to make your own dabs. Go to your local dispensary and get those flowers. And perhaps some of you are aware of the 1 million square foot grow facility that's being built in Freetown, Mass. 1 million square feet. Enough to supply the state and medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, practically the country. Google or DuckDuckGo, if you want the full answer, about the oversupply of cannabis in this country now. Why do you think the stocks are tanking on cannabis right now? We will get 3% of the gross sales in your revenue if you're so concerned about that. But what after year 5? What happens if this is not a successful business? What's left there? What kind of a town do we have? I heard from a real estate agent that she was showing a house, and the smell, the odor that comes from these plants is tremendous. There's wastewater problems. Out in Oregon and California, they're having issues with how to treat. The taxpayers are left with dealing with the problems of the groundwater being infiltrated by the waste. There's a whole industry that goes with this. I'm not sure that we're taking the time to look at it. I'm very concerned about the DEP interim wellhead that is located abutting this location, and the Westport Land Trust land that abuts. I'm also concerned about excuse me, I have a lot of concerns. I'm concerned about some things that were said earlier about the host agreement, which I know this is supposed to be seen by all, but there are now a federal grand jury investigation of 6 towns in Massachusetts because the host agreement that was agreed to by the town, and some of these things that I think I heard, I hope I'm wrong, don't sound like they're legal according to the Cannabis Control Commission. The authorities are we've had 2 years to have this industry understood? No. We haven't seen the ramifications. Start looking at what's going on in Oregon, in California,
1 minute
and
remaining.
the rest. Thank you. That's enough.
Sir?
Hello, this is Keith Vandenberg. So I have 3 issues with this topic. I'm not going to argue about whether we want weed in Massachusetts or not, but I'm talking about the cost of building a dispensary in Westport or future dispensaries in Westport. I work in Newport, and every Friday I come home and I see a disaster in Fall River. The entire place is gridlocked because of the traffic, and the detail cops, they have to place there every weekend on Saturday, Sunday to make sure that traffic tries to move slowly, right, or safely. But Fall River didn't assume that cost was going to be there, so now they're trying to go back to the dispensary and try to work out costs, and the dispensary saying, "Oh, sorry, we already agreed on a cost. We're going to stick with that," and the cops are on you. So they're fighting over that now too. Previous speaker had mentioned about also the lawsuits that are coming out of this stuff too, right? If you reject a dispensary, of course they're going to appeal. That's going to have legal costs. The next thing is about community. Now, based on where this current dispensary is going, it may not be such of a big issue, but on maybe other dispensaries, there's an entire cul-de-sac that was there first in Fall River before that dispensary got put in there. And now people are parking all over their lawns and all over their property, and they can't get rid of them. And the town of city of Fall River said it's going to take upwards of 2 years to get a traffic site done and figure out if they can put a light in there. Those people have to deal with that for the next 2 years. And the last part of it is zoning, right? If this goes to zone, who's going to decide what zonings, where these businesses can go, the zoning board or the planning board? As we can see earlier with the farming and the Department of Health, these committees vote based on what they think, not what the people think. So if the zoning plan decides, yep, that's a good place to go, they have enough parking, they don't care if they're going to block up Route 6 and block everybody from trying to get to their homes. If there's enough people that don't make us think about it, it's going to go and it's going to become permanent, and we have no way of stopping it. Today we had a fortunate case where we had a lot of farmers come out here and support that, where we actually able to overturn that. But it'd be a shame if we have to deal with this on a regular basis because we don't have that. Thank you.
There were several questions. I didn't know if anybody wanted to address those first, or...
Sure. Well, you're next. Floor is yours.
My name is Stacy Silva Boutwell. I'm a lifelong resident here in Westport. I just have a couple of questions, and Mr. Moderator, I'm not sure who to address them to.
To me first.
My questions are, is anyone under the age of 18 permitted to buy medical or non-medical marijuana in this town, state? And the second thing is, what are the regulations put in place to keep them out of the hands of children?
So, Mr. Eichmann, can you tell us if state law allows medical or recreational marijuana to fall in the hands of minors under 18?
Mr. Moderator, the answer to that question is no. Persons under 18 cannot purchase marijuana. The regulations in place to keep it out of the hands of minors are enacted by the Cannabis Control Commission. Those apply to all establishments that they license. They have to abide by those regulations. There are many regulations regarding packaging, labeling, advertising, things like that. And they conduct inspections as well.
Okay, the next question that I have is there any kind of regulation that stops people who are legally able to buy medical or non-medical marijuana from going to Fall River to buy it and bring it back here to town?
Well, Mr. Eichmann, is there anything stopping we Westporters from going to Fall River to purchase marijuana and then returning to Westport?
Mr. Moderator, legally, no.
Okay. And the previous speaker mentioned something about water systems, and I was just wondering if the town has any kind of regulation with how any kind of waste is disposed of at the facility.
So you're questioning whether the town has regulations about waste disposal at a retail recreational marijuana facility?
Yes. Yeah, if it's growing, if it's processing marijuana, is the water filtered? Is it put through any kind of...
So are you talking about a retail operation or a growing?
I guess both, because
operation
I
of
believe that the
processing?
facility that's going in is looking to be both. So I guess both.
I'm going to take a wild guess that will fall in the Board of Health's area of responsibility. Anybody from the Board of Health want to tell us if there are regulations that would control the disposal of waste from marijuana facilities of all types?
I'm not an expert on that.
Can you lean into the microphone a little bit?
I'm not an expert on that, but the Board of Health does have a lot of statutory authority under Title V for septic systems, and also there are we do have local well regulations as well as state regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Thank you. Lawrence Holsworth. So I have a couple of questions, firstly, that relate to law enforcement around this issue. In particular, I would like to know what the Westport Police Department's position is with regards to any negative impact or additional impact that such a facility might have on them. I mean, I know, for example, that we are currently looking to fund the hiring of 2 additional police officers to cover the beat here in Westport. So I'd be curious to know what the police department's view is with regards to this. And then secondly, which is also a law enforcement related issue, I guess, that relates to the ability to detect stoned drivers in the same way that we have breathalyzers for driving under the influence of alcohol. Does such a test exist currently now also for the detection of whether people are stoned while they're driving?
Okay. So first, is there anyone in the hall who is authorized to speak on behalf of the Westport Police Department to give the department's opinion of risks or concerns relative to recreational marijuana facility? It does not appear that there is, so it doesn't look like we're going to be able to get an answer to that question. But it would require a little less authority for someone to answer whether or not a test exists to determine whether someone is illegally driving under the influence of marijuana. Mr. Eichmann, I don't know if that's a legal question, whether the test exists, but.
Mr. Moderator, I don't think it is a legal question. My understanding is from listening to police chiefs in many other towns across the Commonwealth that at this point there is no test that can be used on the road to determine whether someone is under the influence of marijuana that will stand up in court.
Thank you. Anything further?
If I have some time left, I'd like to make a brief statement. You know, the fact of the matter is marijuana is legal now for recreational use in the state of Massachusetts and in the town of Westport. We have seen over the last 50, 60, 70, 80 years that the war on drugs has been an absolute failure. There's more out of control now than it ever was before. Thousands of people die every year as a result of that, let alone from self-induced drug abuse. I think it's far more reasonable that we legalize and regulate and educate than to continue to stick our heads in the sand and say no, 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 no. I thought we would have learned that lesson in 1919 from Prohibition. As someone said recently, you know, it took income tax laws to catch Al Capone. But no one ever would have known who Al Capone was if it hadn't been for Prohibition in the first place. And, you know, I think that's also what's led to the growing movement across the country to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. I also had the opportunity personally to live in the Netherlands for a couple of years. And as you might know or might not, you know, in the Netherlands, marijuana use has been legal for many, many years. And they have far fewer problems across the board with drug addiction, substance abuse, poor performing grades in school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, than we have in this country with all of our, you know, with all of our illegalities and enforcement issues. So I think, you know, that the horse has left the barn on that issue. It's legal. It's going to continue to become ever more legal across the country. We're missing out if we don't, you know, if we don't get on the boat.
Thank you for the point
here.
of order, but I think it's close enough to the topic that I'm going to continue loud, although I'm going to warn you got 30 seconds left.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to, you know, just to wrap it up, I'm not particularly personally in favor one way or the other of partaking of the substance. I personally wouldn't do it myself. But it's no different from smoking or drinking alcohol. And if we stick our heads in the sand, we're just going to miss out, and the problem's going to grow, you know, and potential problems will just continue to grow around us. So let's get on the boat. Let's get it in here, you know, let's regulate, educate, and move forward. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Gillespie, you're next.
Call the question.
Second.
So, once again, a vote to call the question is to see whether we want to hear more discussion of this topic or not. So a yes vote means that you've heard enough discussion to know how you want to vote on the motion under Article 4. A no vote means you'd like to hear more discussion. So all those in favor of the motion to call the question will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Okay, that is carried by a clear 2/3 majority. So we'll now proceed to a vote on the motion under Article 4. All those in favor will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is carried.
Just have to remind people, please be quiet.
I'm going to again ask people who are leaving early to please offer us the courtesy of leaving quietly so that the rest of us who remain can continue the meeting. Thank you. Article 5, to see if the town will vote to repeal its bylaws and regulation identified as Article 69, prohibition of non-medical marijuana establishes 6901 and/or taken under action relative thereto. This is by petition. May I have a motion, please? I'm sorry, you weren't able to hear that? I apologize, I'll repeat it. And I apologize, there's an error with the slides here, so we're going to do without slides for the next couple of articles. Article 5, to see if the town will vote to repeal its bylaws and regulations identified as Article 69, prohibition of non-medical marijuana establishments, and or take any other action relative thereto. This is by petition. May I have a motion, please?
I move the town to adopt the provisions of Article 5 as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second? I have a motion and a second. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommended in favor 7-1 with 1 member absent.
Mr. Bernard, would you like to begin discussion?
Yes, don't worry about the slides. Okay. Everyone's heard it. I just want to make sure now clarify Article 5. Article 5, what it does, it allows the town to expand the non-medical establishments to include a wide array of businesses that can come to town, like testing facilities. And that means the town can potentially get facilities and make money out of testing the products that are needed in the Commonwealth. It is allowed to manufacture non-medical products. It allows for retail and cultivation, but it also opens up craft cultivation. And that is really the key, that now it opens it up to our craft cultivator co-ops in town to be able to pursue this if they want to. Article 5 has the same benefits as of Article 4, but we wanted to pass both of them together because we want to include everybody in this. Forget about all the other numbers. It is really opening up the town to even more financial benefits. I will leave it to questions so that people can have any concerns. The one thing I do want to say is that there have been concerns about environment, facilities, things like that. The rules are in place for that. Everything is viewed and reviewed by our town, by our planning board, by a selectman. Again, this is very controlled businesses. But I'll leave with that. Simple.
Thank you. Mr. Corey?
Move to call the question.
Is there any, I'm not going to accept that motion until I see that there's no one else in the room. Mr. Vieira?
Mr. Moderator, we're going into Article 6 now and these other articles that talk about planning board. Normally, we deal with planning board zoning issues at the town meeting, the annual town meeting. It's a little unusual to do it at a special town meeting, and based on the wishes of this board, town meeting, I guess they can, and your wishes, sir, I guess they can decide what they want to do, but I thought it was a little bit awkward to go down this path. It's a special town meeting for one purpose. We jumped on something else, and now we're going to pass all kinds of zoning regulations to push it through one night.
We're not discussing a zoning regulation right now. We're discussing a general bylaw amendment.
I'm suggesting articles, the rest of the articles relate to the passing of the previous article. And all those should be done at an annual town meeting, which has been the tradition. If we're going to change that tonight, I guess we can do that too. But it has been the tradition of this town in the past.
Thank you. Mr. Corey?
Yes, with regards to Article 5, this matter went before the Planning Board, and I believe they took a vote. Mr. Whitten is here, the chairman. The proposed articles would not conflict. None of the proposed articles would conflict with the current zoning regulations. This article here is very important because it opens up an opportunity for Westport, not for any more retail locations, but for testing facilities. 2 years ago, prior to the 2018 vote, there was a company looking to use the Science Technology Overlay District. This company was going to dedicate funds to developing that for Westport. No manufacturing was going to occur. No retail sales were going to occur. This was just an area for development and testing. It was going to bring many jobs, high-paying jobs with a median income, their estimate with a median value of over $64,000. That was negated by the vote of 2018. So this Article 5 works hand in hand with Article 4 Town council issued an opinion with regards to Article 4, which just passed, which stated that the article would not, would simply offer the same protections that every other medical facility had gained in 2016. Article 5 offers it back to the community to allow the select board to make a determination what facilities can come into Westport. A lot of misinformation was put out there a little while ago with regards to money laundering and all of these horrible things. That does not occur. This is the most heavily regulated industry in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The process to get approved is very, very time consuming. Every member of the corporation is submitted to both an IRS check and a full criminal background check. All of the funds that are gained or by the facility must be accounted for, and the books have to be kept and open to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Every product that is created in a grow facility or a manufacturing facility is subject to what's called a seed-to-sale system. From the time the plant is grown to the time it is disposed of, it carries an individual identifier, which almost makes it impossible for any corruption to occur within the process. Lastly, with regards to Article 5, we're not talking about opening up a floodgate of facilities within Westport. The ultimate arbiters of who comes in are the Board of Selectmen. A presentation is made before the Select Board, at which time the applicants must identify all of the locations, or the location that they want to establish. Then they have to talk about how the facility is going to run and what the benefits to Westport are. At that point, public comment is available, and input from neighbors and abutters would be impactful on the Select Board. So it's not going to be a willy-nilly approach. Before anyone gets to apply to the state, they need a letter of non-opposition or approval from the town management, which in our case is the Select Board. So I would ask you to approve Article 5 and trust the Select Board to act in the best interests of the town and act as the true gatekeepers, because that's what their job is in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, you're next.
Hi, Melissa Pacheco. I rise in opposition to this article and the ones to follow. I know Article 5 has already been passed, but I ask you all to think of businesses don't come in because they want to give the town money. They come in because it's a revenue-generating business for themselves. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. The second thing that I want to say is that one of the things that you'll note in the articles to come is that one of the items that they're going to be able to sell is gummies, right? Gummies are aimed at our children, and that's what is going to be. So by approving the articles to come, you're going to be approving those types of things, which I think needs a larger audience. I think it should go to town meeting so that everybody can have a say in regards to what needs to be moved forward. There are a number of articles in California when they passed it. The rise in the number of children who had contacted the poison control rose substantially over the number of years under 18, and even under the age of 6 they rose, because children were able to get a hold of these things. They see their parents' gummies or whatever. So I think there are a lot more things to consider other than additional revenue to our town. So I rise in opposition to these articles. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
I'm Donna Amaral. I am also concerned, as the previous speaker stated. I know, based on the fact that I'm a nurse and I'm a psychiatric nurse, and I've worked in mental health and substance abuse most of my life. So I have legitimate concerns, but I also know that people are going to purchase marijuana and use marijuana even if we do not open this up as recreational in Massachusetts. So my question actually is perhaps for the selectmen, because money seems to be the driving force here. How much of this money is going to be earmarked for mental health services and substance abuse services within the town of Westport? Since our selectmen so eloquently pointed out that many of issues that drive people to use these substances are based on mental health and abuse issues, I would like to know how much will be earmarked, and if there isn't a plan to do that, the only way I could support it as if money is earmarked specifically for mental health and substance abuse.
I can answer that for you, that monies cannot be earmarked in that way. Town meeting decides how the town's funds are appropriated. So that would be a decision for town meeting what to do with whatever tax revenue we take in.
As it stands, I cannot support it, but if I hear that our town is going to address those problems that are associated with substance abuse and mental health issues, then I could support it.
Thank you. Sir?
Yes, Chris Salt. Just on the money issue, how might the town spend the local taxes they receive from the host authority, from the corporation or whatever?
Well, town meeting decides how the town's funds are spent. The finance committee and the board of selectmen together put together a budget that they suggest to town meeting, but at our annual town meeting, we sit here and we vote and decide where that money goes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but because you've already spoken, I need to get everyone else their first chance before you can speak again. Sir?
So we've talked a little bit about some misrepresentation and misunderstandings on both sides, I think. I think someone brought up a discussion before about children and marijuana use, access to marijuana, things of that nature. I myself as well work in mental health. I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. And so I do see a lot of substance use in the form of opiate addiction, crack cocaine, things of that nature. In terms of the effect on children and what there is to regulate, I'm not sure if people are aware or not aware that in terms of the adults who are allowing access to or not locking up their medical or recreational marijuana, there are safeguards in place to protect children in the event that someone is exposed to that. When children come into an emergency room or are evaluated and are exposed, the Department of Children and Families gets involved with these families to discuss what we call harm reduction, safeguarding. There is just as much, if not more, addictive substances in your everyday pharmacological cabinet in your house that your children, grandchildren, children are exposed to that people don't think to lock up. We see more cases in the emergency room every day of children getting into prescribed medications, prescribed narcotics, prescribed sleeping medications that have a more profound effect on people and their families and disruption in families than we do with marijuana. I think if we're looking at it from a community standpoint, we just saw everybody arguing on Facebook about how their tax bill went up. I opened my tax bill. I can't believe this. The town of Westport's doing nothing. There's something here before you that is heavily regulated that can be done to help offset some of those things. And yeah, it's like anything else, like alcohol. It needs to be regulated. It is regulated. You're never going to stop every single person from doing something bad. But if we educate and teach people about this, I think that it could be a beneficial entity in our town. That's all.
Sir, can you help me? Have you already spoken on this question?
On this one, I spoke on the previous article. On this one. I just want to move the question.
Okay. So, I don't think we need a review on what it means to call the question. A yes vote means that you've heard all the discussion you need to form an opinion and decide how to vote on Article 6. A no vote means you would like to stay here longer and hear more discussion. So, all those in favor of calling the question will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously, so we now move to a vote on Article 6. All those... Oh, excuse me, I apologize. Thank you for the correction. Article 5. So all those in favor of the motion under Article 5 will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is carried. Article 6, to see if the town will vote to amend its bylaws and regulations regarding non-medical marijuana establishments as described in the article. May I have a motion, please?
I motion to pass. Move to pass.
To pass over, you mean?
To pass over.
Okay, so we have a motion to pass over, which means a motion to take no action on this article. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion to pass over? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. Article 7. To see if the town will vote to amend the Town of Westport zoning bylaws, Article 1, Purpose and Definitions, Section 1.1, Definitions as described in the article by petition. May I have a motion, please?
A motion to pass over.
We have a motion to pass over. Is there a second? Motion second to pass over. Any discussion? Seeing none, all the... Oh, okay. Mr. Wyden?
Please do not pass over these zoning articles. It will be one of our only ways to regulate this open marijuana business now. And these are the articles that the petitioner has suggested, and we have some amendments to them, but I think it is not a good idea to pass this over.
Any further discussion on the motion to pass over? Mr. Bernal, did you want to say further on the motion to pass over? Mr. Valcourt?
I would also ask that you not pass over the Article 7 through 10. And I agree with Mr. Whiten. These are the zoning articles pertaining to the regulation of the use, and I would urge you to vote to support these, because they are the way in which we can regulate this use.
Mr. Corey, on the motion to pass over?
Yes, I'd also ask the petitioners not to withdraw the motion.
Okay, so any further discussion on the motion to pass over Article 7? So we're going to proceed to vote on that. So a yes vote means that we will take no action under Article 7 and we move on to Article 8. A no vote means that we will act on Article 7, carry out a discussion, and proceed to a vote. So all those in favor, is that clear to everyone? Okay, once more. A yes vote means that we will pass over Article 7. So that means we will take no motion, we will take no action under Article 7, and we will move on to Article 8. If you vote no right now, that means we will not pass over Article 7. That means we will act on Article 7. Is that clear? Okay. All those in favor of the motion to pass over Article 7 will please raise their hands. Those opposed? So that is defeated. So we will not pass over Article 7. So may I have an affirmative motion on Article 7?
So moved.
I move the town to adopt the provisions of Article 7 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
So a motion and a second to adopt the provisions of Article 7 as printed in the warrant. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommended in favor 7-1 with one member absent.
Thank you. Discussion? Mr. Bernal?
I apologize for the confusion. That's totally my fault. We did add some language to this article that we can have a discussion on to the merits of that. I'll leave it to that.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Whiten, will you offer us the Planning Board's recommendation and then give us any comments you would like to?
Yes. Now that I get everything mixed up.
You speak into the microphone, please.
One second, please. Okay, the Planning Board, at a regular meeting of the Planning Board held on February 5th, the Westport Planning Board held the public hearing on the petition article 7, 8, 9, and 10 concerning the non-medical marijuana as appearing on the final draft of the special town meeting warrant for February 11th, 2020. The board voted 3-0 on February 11th, today, to submit this report to a special town meeting. Whereas the Planning Board, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Chapter 5, held a public hearing on February 5th to review said articles and hear interested parties on the petition zoning Articles 7, 8, 9, and 10 regarding non-medical marijuana. Whereas the board reviewed the existing bylaws and compared the proposed amendments to previous zoning articles relating to non-medical marijuana. The board reviewed the opinion of Town Council, Attorney Jeffrey Blake, and comments from the town planner, board members, petitioners, and the public. The board found that the proposed articles generally comply as to form and function with the existing Town of Westport zoning bylaw, and as far as we could determine, with the laws of the Commonwealth. The Planning Board recommends adoption of the proposed zoning articles 7, 8, 9, and 10, provided the general bylaws are amended permitting recreational marijuana.
Thank you. And for those of you veterans of town meeting, you may have noticed that I've been allowing us to reference multiple articles at one time, which we don't normally do. We normally just stick to one, but I think and it's more expedient to do it this way. And so I hope the record notes that we got a planning board recommendation on all of the remaining articles. Great. So any further discussion? Yes.
Mr. Moderator, I'm worried about Article 5.
That we cannot go back to Article 5. We are on Article 7 now.
Can we move to reconsider?
No. The only way I would accept the motion to reconsider is if there is some new information that was not available to the meeting before that would likely.
Well, I would suggest there is new information. The original spokesperson for this article made the motion to pass over. There was no discussion. There was a vote of about 20 people on it that they passed over. And my question is it an article that is important to these various matters that the planning board is speaking about at this time?
Okay, I'm sorry, that is not a valid reason to reconsider Article 5.
It was Article 6.
You asked to reconsider Article 5, did you not?
When?
6. Okay,
I'm
either one.
Confused
Either
on
one.
the numbers. It was the first one that they moved to pass over.
Okay.
6.
Okay,
6. How
so
about 6?
there was a motion to pass over, and the meeting adopted that motion, so we passed over Article 6.
At that point, there was no discussion, and
There was an opportunity for discussion. I asked if there was any discussion of the motion to pass over. There was none.
do you have an estimate of how many people voted on that? My recollection is that there were about 20 people who voted on it. And I think that was due to lack of understanding of what that article was addressing. That's my point.
Well, I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding there. That's been our longstanding procedure. There's a motion to pass over. We get a second. We ask if there's any discussion. If there is none, the body votes. And I call the votes as I hear them. Certainly, if you feel like I've miscalled the vote, any 7 voters can stand up and say you got the vote wrong, and we will count hands. So, any further discussion of the motion under Article 7? Ma'am?
Cynthia Anderson. I would just like to know
I think you're going to need to bend that microphone down to
okay.
first
I
to
would
hear.
just like to know quickly what we're voting on here. Is this to give the planning board more regulation or more power or whatever to like where they're located, zoning and operations, like if it's a growing operation or if it's a retail operation? Does this affect the planning board's ability to monitor that or regulate it?
So your question is, does this article affect the planning board's ability to regulate marijuana facilities?
And how to vote for it? Like, one way or the other, it's legal and it's happening. But if it's going to be able to go into like a residential area where there's already concerns about, like when you read about other areas where they already have it growing, like in Colorado and that, where there is a smell to the processing and growing, and a lot of local people that are affected. So does this give the power to the planning board to like regulate the zoning so that it doesn't affect local people? Maybe. That's all I want to know.
So
just
your
so I know
question
how
is,
it votes.
does this article give the planning board the power to regulate marijuana-related businesses?
As far as abutters or areas, like, neighborhoods, or, I'm sure it's not going to be down at the point, so, we would like to know where it's going to be.
Okay, so is there something more specific than just, does it allow the planning board to regulate marijuana facilities relative to abutters?
Yes, abutters and zoning, like where is it going to be, like if there's like areas that have children more that could be affected, or like water where it could affect like people with a greater, that have the same resource, will have the same resource towards the water and the discharge and the septic. so that it's not affecting the abutters, or we don't have water and we don't have sewers in this area, so is it going to affect that?
So
And
are you
public-
asking whether these facilities are going to affect sewage, or are you asking if the planning board
What are the
would have the
regulations?
authority to regulate it?
What are the regulations? Does it give the planning board the ability to regulate, like, stormwater runoff, the water that goes into discharge from the processing, or the smell from the processing? That seems to be a problem in a lot of these areas. So that's what I want to know, so that we don't vote and say, yeah, we'll vote yes, and then it's a free-for-all wherever it goes. Is there?
Do
Is it?
do you have a concise question? I'm having trouble understanding what your question is. You asked a pretty concise question, I thought, about whether this will give the planning board the power to regulate marijuana businesses, but then I don't understand the relation to stormwater and...
Mr. Moderator?
Does this give the planning board site regulation over processing and growing operations?
Okay. Mr. Whiten, can you answer that question for us?
This particular article does not. All it does is define various parts of this process.
Okay.
Defines marijuana establishments, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Anything further, ma'am?
All set.
Thanks. I think you were next.
Mr. Moderator, my name is Lori Marinoni. I have a question about Article 7. I'm hoping I can direct it through you to the original author. The original author of Articles 4 through 10 mentioned that Articles 7 through 10 would be relevant only if Article 6 passed. And my question is, since we have passed over Article 6, could there be an explanation now of why Articles 7 through 10 are indeed actually relevant tonight?
Sure. Mr. Bernal, would you like to offer us a brief answer to that?
That was my understanding too, but apparently the planning board wants this to happen, so I think we should defer to them.
Thanks, ma'am. Anything further? Thanks. Mr. Corey?
Move to call the question.
Okay. So a motion is second to call the question. I think we understand this by now. A yes vote means you've heard all the discussion that you need to make a decision on the motion under Article 7. A no vote means you'd like to hear more discussion. All those in favor of calling the question will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried. So now we proceed to the vote on Article 7. So all those in favor of the motion under Article 7 will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is carried by a clear 2/3 majority. Article 8, to see if the town will vote to amend the town of Westport zoning bylaws by adding Article 27, non-medical marijuana facilities and uses, as described in the article, is by petition. Mr. Bernal, will you offer some motion, please?
I move the town to adopt the provisions of Article 8 as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Motion is second. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommended in favor 7-1. One member was absent.
Mr. Whiten?
The recommendation is as previous. Do you want me to read it again?
Nope. Thanks.
Okay, I move to amend the motion on the floor by eliminating the unrestricted district from section 27.3 requirements, paragraph 1 and paragraph 6, to read as follows. Non-medical marijuana establishments shall be located in the Science and Technology Overlay District or the Business District.
You meant non-retail marijuana establishments, right?
I'm sorry, yes. 6, cultivation within the business district shall be located entirely within one or more fully enclosed buildings with conventional or post-framed opaque rigid walls and roof covering. Cultivation within the Science and Technology Overlay District shall be located within one or more fully enclosed buildings with conventional or post-framed walls, rigid walls, or properly secured greenhouse structures. Hoop houses are specifically prohibited. In those two paragraphs, the unrestricted district is removed.
So we have a motion to amend the motion under Article 8. So we have a second to the motion to amend. Any further discussion on the motion to amend? Yes, Mr. I did. And this is just a few words. They're striking a couple of actually, they're striking and restricted, they're striking the word or and the words and restricted district from 27.3, section 1, and striking the words and unrestricted district. The motion to amend is to, if you look at your, in your warrant, under Article 8, 27.3 requirements. You see that section? Right now it reads, non-retail marijuana establishments shall be located in the Science and Technology Overlay District, Business District, and Unrestricted District. They are proposing an amendment to have that read Overlay District or Business District, and it will delete Unrestricted District. And then further down in number 6, where the first line says cultivation within the Business District and Unrestricted District, they're proposing to strike the words and unrestricted district. So that is the motion before us right now, is to, we had a main motion under Article 8. There's now a motion to amend that. So is there any further discussion on the motion for that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of, Mr. Corey, you wanted to speak to the amendment?
I believe there's one more area with unrestricted in items in paragraph 7.
Well, so right now, we're talking about the amendment we have before us. If we may need to do another amendment, we can do that, but let's settle this one right now. So any further discussion on the motion to amend the motion under Article 8?
I'm sorry, I'm really confused with this.
Go ahead.
There was a, I think the planning board was saying, there was a piece of it that said that nothing could ever be grown except for within the confines of a building. Is that part of this? Because I have a question about that, if that means anywhere within Westport, it cannot be grown except for within the confines?
Okay, so that's not part of the amendment. Okay. Under Article 8.
But he just spoke to that, so I'm a little confused as to where that fits in.
Okay, what he was doing is reading the text of the proposed bylaw amendment to note the changes they are proposing with their proposed amendment.
Okay.
Okay? So right now, we're just trying to decide whether we are going to strike the words "and unrestricted district" from 27.3, Section 1, and add the word "or" between overlay district and business district, and strike the words "and restricted" and unrestricted district from the first line of 27.3(6). We're just trying to decide right now whether we want to do that, strike those words. So any further discussion on that amendment?
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
are we also striking that phrase from 27.3, number 4?
No.
We're not. That
No.
one is left. Thank you.
So any further discussion on the motion to amend? All those in favor of amending the motion as proposed, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, so we now return to the motion under Article 8 as amended. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is carried by a clear 2/3 majority. Article 9, to see if the town will amend the Town of Westport zoning bylaws, Article 4, use regulations, Section 4.0.1, residence/agricultural districts, subparagraph B1 as described in the article. This is by petition. Yes? Yeah, thank you. Mr. Bernal, will you offer us a motion under Article 9?
I move the town to adopt the provisions of Article 9 as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second? I have a motion and a second. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommended in favor 701. One member was absent.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion under Article 9 will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried by a clear two-thirds majority. Article 10, we're almost there. To see if the town will vote to amend the table of use regulations in the town of Westport zoning bylaws by adding the non-medical marijuana establishments use as described in the article. This is by petition. Mr. Burnell?
I move the town to adopt the provisions of Article 10 as printed in the warrant.
Is there a second? Motion is second. May I have the Finance Committee recommendation, please?
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommended in favor 7-1. One member was absent.
Thank you. Mr. Whiten, would you like to offer some discussion?
Yes, I move to amend the motion on the floor by prohibiting marijuana independent testing laboratories, cultivators, product manufacturers, and retailers in the unrestricted zone. And what we're doing here is just making this compliant with Article 8 that we just passed.
Okay, can you speak that amendment again, because I didn't follow it? What is that, what language are you proposing to
Okay,
amend?
so the article is a table of use.
Yep.
And the table of use shows that currently in the warrant, that all these different things are allowed in the unrestricted zone in the middle column. So we're crossing out those things and substituting N for no.
Okay, is that clear to everyone? Yeah. Good. So anyone has a question on what the amendment, the proposed amendment is? Replacing all the, okay, so any further discussion of the amendment? Seeing none, all those in, okay, go ahead.
Hello, Richard Stang. Just a point of clarification. Was he saying that everything's going to be N except for the craft cultivator in the unrestricted zone? Is the craft?
I believe he was saying that everything under unrestricted would be in. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
The craft cultivator would still be by special permit of the planning board.
Thank you.
SPA and PB.
Okay. But the remaining, the top three lines under unrestricted would be converted to ends. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
Any further discussion of the amendment? Yes.
I just have a quick question. Does that mean that you could not cultivate in an agricultural area?
No, it's only talking about the unrestricted zone right now. The amendment would only affect the unrestricted zone.
All right.
Any further discussion of the amendment? Ma'am?
What is a craft cultivator?
Because the craft cultivator is not affected by this amendment, that's not really an appropriate question for right now.
Okay.
Once we settle the amendment, that would be an appropriate question. So, any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to amend the main motion under Article 10 will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried. So we now move back to the discussion of the motion under Article 10 as amended. Ma'am?
Sue Sherman, I have a question. In Article 8, it says, under 27.3 of requirements, craft cultivators shall be allowed in the agricultural district. And now in Article 10, we have craft cultivators in a residential/agricultural district. Does that mean that craft cultivators can occur in a residential?
Is that a question
That's
for
a
the planning board?
question through you to the
Planning board?
planning board. Sounds great.
Mr. Whiten?
Okay, so if I could understand the question again, is
Would adoption of this article lead to craft cultivation being allowed in a residential district? Is that correct?
okay.
Or any kind of cultivation in a
Yep.
residential district?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So I think I can clarify this. On page 6, number 4, craft cultivators shall be allowed in the agricultural district. There is no agricultural district. There is a residential agricultural district. So most of the town is agricultural, residential, or residential agricultural. So it
So
would be,
is the
it would
answer
be-
that this then would in fact allow marijuana growing in residential districts? Residential/agricultural districts?
Yes.
Yeah. Anything further?
I just think that's something we may want to keep in mind if passing this allows it to be in any residential area.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Cynthia Anderson, what is craft cultivator? What is that?
Is there someone who would like to answer the question, what is a craft cultivator? Mr. Bernal, just a brief answer, please.
Craft cultivator means a marijuana cultivator comprised of residents of the Commonwealth and organized as a limited liability company, limited partnership, or cooperative corporation under the laws of the Commonwealth. A cooperative license to cultivate, manufacture, or transfer marijuana to marijuana establishments, but not to consumers.
Thank you. Ma'am?
So this could be a commercial craft cultivator? So you could have a business right next to you growing? Is that what it is? That's why I was like, what is a craft cultivator? I mean, just like we have craft farmers now and that, so it is.
Well, he just read you
What-
I think the legal definition. Is there some clarification of that we can give you?
Yeah, so this could be a business, it could be a corporation, it could be anything, is a craft cultivator. It's not just somebody with a pot, in their basement. It could be a corporation or a business.
So is
In a
your
residential area.
question, can a craft cultivator be a corporation?
A corporation or a business in a
So your
residential
question is,
area.
can a craft cultivator be a corporation or a business?
Yes, in a residential area. That's what I'm asking about this.
Okay, so your question is, if this bylaw is adopted, then can a craft cultivator be a corporation or a business in a residential area?
Yeah. Can your neighbor open up a pot shop?
You keep making the question more complicated.
All right.
I'm trying to pass it along for you.
Okay, all right.
But every time you add something, it gets a little bit more confusing. So
Sorry.
did I have the question right, that you want to know if passage of this will then make it possible for a craft cultivator to be a business or a corporation in a residential area?
Yes, I guess.
Okay, that sounds like a yes or no question. Ms. Corey, can you offer an answer?
It's a technical answer, but no, it will allow a company. It's different under Massachusetts law. An LLC, a craft cultivator in Massachusetts must have one member of the LLC be a farmer, someone who's filed a Form F on their tax returns within the past 3 years. So it's a limited liability company, not a corporation, but it would allow limited use by craft cultivators on parcels more than 5 acres, more than 500 feet from any occupied dwelling.
Okay.
But it's a company, not a corporation.
So it is a limited liability company that can apparently do that, but would have to be 500 feet from any dwelling, right? So anything further?
So if I have 10 acres, I can open it up in my neighborhood, right? I apply for a farmer's, whatever?
So your question is,
My question
can you
is,
become
I
a
have-
craft cultivator on your 10 acres?
Yes.
How does that really, all right, I guess it relates to, Mr. Corey, can you answer that as briefly as possible? Thanks.
A craft cultivator has to go through the same process that any other applicant for a licensed establishment in Massachusetts. So the first step would be a review of the site and a review of the application by the select board. A craft cultivator is treated exactly the same as a large corporation. So they would have to comply with any of the requirements within the town. Craft cultivators are also subject to the same reviews from the planning board. So it has to be on 5 acres or more, or 500 feet or more from an occupied dwelling.
Thanks. Anything further?
Moderate.
Anything further?
So I could apply, right? If I have over 5 acres? No matter, okay.
Yep.
Just have to get permission
Yep.
from the, thank you.
Mr. Les?
Mr. Moderator, through the planning board, will will a craft cannabis grower have to go through site plan review?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that not, the answer to that is yes, isn't it? Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator?
Ms. Loth?
Jane Lose, I have a question. Seeing the Right to Farm Act has just changed it to parcel and as the definition of a farm, how will that affect anything here when you're talking about craft farmers? Could they be on a parcel as opposed to the 5-acre?
I think I'm going to try and
definition?
answer that and say that they're subject to state law, and we just made a local bylaw, which is not going to contravene state law. So the craft cultivators will be subject to state law and all the state requirements.
If I may, through the moderator, it also isn't considered an exempt agricultural activity.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Sir?
I'd like to call the question.
Okay. All right, we have a motion second to call the question. Yes means you've heard enough. No means you'd like to discuss it some more. All those in favor of calling the question will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is carried unanimously. We now move to a vote on the motion under Article 10. Favor? All those in favor will please raise their hands. Those opposed? That is carried by a clear 2/3 majority. May I have a motion to
adjourn.
dissolve? A motion to dissolve Westport Special Town Meeting? So moved. Is there a second? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you very much. Have a good night.